Chapter 22-25. Sis the middle-aged scholar, are you going to rob me? Yun was so angry that he laughed. This girl in green was definitely the most unreasonable woman he had ever seen. Not only did she raise the price in front of him, but she also asked people to surround him and rob him. She was really reckless. Fellow Taoist, you still have a chance. If you can take out a level 8 divine elixir and 20 level 7 divine elixirs, I'll give you the map and let you leave this place. How about that? The green-clothed girl was arrogant. She stood on the counter and looked down at Zhuo Wentai rather arrogantly. She did not put Zhuo Wentai in her eyes at all. As for the couple that Zhuo Wen had saved, they were trembling in fear. Their eyes were filled with terror. They knew that they were done for. With so many Void Sky experts here, it was useless no matter how strong the young man in white was. After all, the formation in the temple suppressed divine sense. How much strength could the young man in white use? Zhuan sneered and said, "Don't worry about it." As he spoke, Zhuowen flicked his finger, and a wisp of bloody light suddenly flashed out from his spirit ring. This streak of bloody light was extremely fast, instantly passing through the dozen or so black-robed men before finally returning to Zhuo Wen's side. When the blood sword returned to Zhuo Wen's side, the 10 or so black-robed men around Zhuo Wen all clutched their necks. Their eyes bulged out and their bodies trembled. In the end, they all fell to the ground. In the blink of an eye, all of the black-robed cultivators had perished. "Ha, a bunch of trash dares to be arrogant in front of Grandpa. You really don't know your own strength." The shadow of the Blood Immortal floated above the blood sword. The Blood Immortal looked at the dead black-robed cultivators with disdain. When he cut off their necks, he also used a powerful force to shatter the Void Sky Bridge in their bodies into nothingness. It was a fatal blow. Ever since the Blood Immortal sword followed Xiao He to the Devourer King's palace in the Skeleton Realm, it had absorbed a lot of Heaven's Devourer mineral veins. Its strength had soared, and it was now comparable to an ordinary 7th-step Void Sky cultivator. The formation inside the temple could only suppress the divine sense, but it could not suppress a tool cultivator like the Blood Immortal sword. Therefore, it would be strange if the black-robed cultivators were a match for her. Zhuan slapped the Blood Immortal sword. The originally complacent Blood Immortal sword immediately became obedient. While he was at it, he flattered, "Oh, no matter how powerful I am, I can't compare to you, my lord. My lord, you are an unreachable mountain, and I am just a pebble under the mountain, not worth mentioning." Shut up. Zhuan slapped the Blood Immortal sword again. The Blood Immortal sword immediately behaved. The couple behind Zhuo Wen was stunned. They looked at the Blood Immortal sword floating beside Zhuo Wen in disbelief. It had become extremely obedient. The weakest of the black-robed cultivators was a 4th-step Void Sky cultivator. Any one of them could kill the couple in a second. However, the young man in white casually summoned a blood-red divine sword and killed all of them in a second. This was too terrifying. The girl in green was also stunned. When she came back to her senses, she sat on the ground and screamed. Zhuan looked at this scene calmly. The girl in green was not powerful. She had just entered the virtual sky world and had not even consolidated her 1st-step Void Sky world. From her rude and unreasonable character, it could be seen that she had not experienced any great storms. However, this girl could command the black-robed cultivators. It could be seen that there was a powerful figure behind her. "Hand over the map." Zhuan did not intend to do anything to the girl in green. He just spread out his hands and said indifferently. The girl in green was frightened and was still in a daze. Seeing this, Zhuan frowned. Just as he was about to remind her loudly, a sound broke through the air. There was no need for Zhuo Wen to say anything. The Blood Immortal sword beside him screamed and turned into a beam of bloody light. Bang! A terrifying explosion was heard, and an invisible ripple spread throughout the temple. Fortunately, the great formation in the temple was extremely strong. The aftermath of the collision was blocked by the great formation. Boom! The Blood Immortal sword screamed and flew backward. However, when it fell 5 meters behind Zhuo Wen, a vast aura swept out from Zhuo Wen's body and immediately stabilized the Blood Immortal sword. However, The moment Zhuan stabilized the blood-immortal sword, a terrifying gust of wind followed like a shadow and quietly fell on Zhuowen's back. Obviously, this person had predicted that Zhuowen would stabilize the blood-immortal sword and then use this opportunity to attack Zhuowen. The corners of Zhuowen's mouth curled up into a cold smile. Shortly after, a divine sword that was covered in lightning and fire flew out from his spirit ring. This divine sword's aura was much stronger than the blood-immortal sword. It was the Thunder Fire Sword. The Thunder Fire Sword was extremely fast. When it flew out, thunder and fire fell like rain. Suddenly, it collided heavily with the powerful qi behind him. Bang! The powerful aftermath spread. Zhuan waved his sleeve and rolled his Taoist partner to the side. He also stepped on the ground and could not help but retreat to the edge. The Thunder Fire Sword and the Blood Immortal Sword surrounded Zhuowen like loyal guards protecting Zhuowen. The figure that had launched a sneak attack on Zhuowen was continuously pushed back by the collision. However, as the person retreated, he shot out a divine light that covered the counter in front of him. The light formed a transparent shield in front of the girl in green, who was scared out of her wits. It blocked all the attacking energy around her. Zhuan then noticed that the person who was about to attack him was a middle-aged scholar in green. The middle-aged scholar looked cultured and elegant. However, at this moment, his eyes were a little gloomy and surprised. Zhuan grinned and reached out his right hand. He condensed a powerful divine power and suddenly attacked the girl in green. Under Zhuowen's bombardment, the defense formed by the middle-aged scholar's divine power did not last long before shattering. "Wait!" the middle-aged scholar hurriedly said. He did not care about anything else and suddenly flashed forward. He intended to take Zhuowen's attack head-on. Bang! The middle-aged man let out a muffled groan as he waved his right hand, forcefully withstanding Zhuowen's attack. Shortly after, he grabbed the girl in green into his arms and abruptly retreated dozens of meters, looking at Zhuowen in front of him in shock. "Father, this person bullied me. You have to help me beat him." The girl in green finally came to her senses. She felt at ease when she felt the middle-aged scholar's broad arms. Then she pointed at Zhuowen and screamed, "Slap!" Unfortunately, as soon as the young girl finished speaking, the middle-aged scholar's slap whistled over, causing the young girl's face to become incomparably red, and a palm print appeared on her face. "Father, what are you doing?" The girl in green looked at the middle-aged scholar in front of her in disbelief. The middle-aged scholar said coldly, "Go and apologize to this senior." The girl in green looked at Zhuowen in front of her numbly. She knew her father's character well. He would never let her suffer any grievances. Chapter 22-26. News of the space-time key. Although the girl in green was rude and unreasonable, she was not a fool. She could tell from her father's attitude that the young man in white was not someone to be trifled with. The girl in green's beautiful eyes were gloomy. In the end, under the middle-aged scholar's stern gaze, she lowered her head to Zhuowen and said, "Senior, Tang Yu was rude before. Please don't take it to heart. Tang Yu apologizes to you." Zhuowen just looked at all of this coldly and did not speak. On the contrary, the middle-aged scholar laughed and said, "Fellow Taoist, I am Tang Wuxi, the owner of this temple. This is my daughter, Tang Yu. Just now, my daughter was impulsive and did something stupid. Seeing that she is still young, I hope fellow Taoist can be magnanimous." Zhuowen finally opened his mouth and said indifferently, "My name is Zhuowen. It seems that this is all a misunderstanding. This Zhuo will not pursue the matter any further. This time, I came here for the map of the dangerous zone. I hope Brother Tang can give me a copy." The meaning of Zhuowen's words was obvious. His daughter had offended him before and needed some compensation. The compensation was the map. Tang Wuxi laughed and said without any change in his expression, "Of course. Brother Zhuo, take this map. Treat it as an apology." With that, Tang Wuxi waved his sleeve and threw a jade slip to Zhuowen. Zhuowen checked it with his divine sense and put away the jade slip. Then, he cupped his fists at Tang Wuxi and said, "I have some urgent matters to attend to, so I will not stay here for long. Goodbye." After saying that, Zhuowen brought the couple out of the temple. Although the temple was still maintained by the formation, Tang Wuxi did not dare to keep Zhuowen. Naturally, he opened the gate of the formation and let Zhuan pass. After Zhuan left the temple, Tang Wuxi's eyes suddenly became gloomy. Beside him, Tang Yu's beautiful eyes suddenly turned red and tears flowed down. Tang Wuxi pitifully wiped away the tears on Tang Yu's face. Unfortunately, the latter turned her head away, obviously ungrateful. Xiao Yu, this Zhuan is not simple. Father had just exchanged blows with him and I know how powerful he is. Father alone may not be able to take him down. What would you do if a fight really broke out in this temple? He might take you as a hostage, Tang Wuxi said helplessly. Tang Yu was slightly moved, but she still stubbornly said, "Don't we still have first uncle and second uncle? If the three of you take action, would you still be afraid of Zhuan?" Tang Wuxi scratched his head and said, "Your first uncle and second uncle are not here. You also know that your first uncle and second uncle are now in the danger zone, looking for the space-time key that was lost there. This thing is extremely important. Nothing can happen to it. Moreover, the route I gave Zhuan is not correct. The destination is not the opposite of the danger zone, but an extremely dangerous space collapse. Moreover, I have already contacted your first uncle and second uncle. When the time comes, we will go to that place together and capture that Zhuan. At that time, you can do whatever you want with him." Hearing this, Tang Yu immediately smiled through her tears and said, Good, father is so kind. That's right, this person has many treasures on him. He casually took out a level 5 divine pellet to save someone, and even took out a level 7 divine pellet without hesitation. I'm afraid this person must have something even more precious than a level 7 divine pellet. Tang Wuxi nodded. Even if Tang Yu did not say it, he knew that Zhuan must have some rare treasures on him. However, the other things, just the 2 divine swords he had fought with before, were not simple. Especially the Thunder Fire sword, which gave him an extremely dangerous feeling. At the moment when he fought with the Thunder Fire sword, he knew that if he continued to fight with it, he would be in a very bad situation. Walking out of the temple, the couple respectfully cupped their hands toward Zhuan and said gratefully, "Senior, thank you for your help this time. Otherwise, we would have been killed. We will never be able to repay this kindness." Zhuan waved his hand and said with a smile, "You don't have to thank me. It was just a small matter." Saying so, Zhuan planned to go to the danger zone ahead. With the route map, it would be a piece of cake for him to pass through the danger zone. The male cultivator suddenly stopped Zhuan. Seeing Zhuan's strange look, the male cultivator hurriedly said, "Senior, that Tang Wuxi is not a kind person. Perhaps he has done something to the route map. You have to be careful." "Yes, Senior, that Tang Wuxi has 2 elder brothers. Their strength is above Tang Wuxi's. Perhaps he is secretly plotting against you. You have to be careful." The female cultivator hurriedly agreed. Zhuan looked at the couple in surprise. Although their cultivation was not high, they seemed to know a lot. "That Tang Yu is deliberately making things difficult for the 2 of you? What is her purpose?" Zhuan narrowed his eyes. He originally didn't care about this couple, but he felt that they might know some secrets and that Tang Yu was deliberately targeting them. As for why she was targeting them, it was likely that they had some secrets. Sure enough, as soon as Zhuan said this, the couple's faces suddenly turned pale. "If you don't want to talk, I won't force you." Seeing that the couple was unwilling to speak for a long time, Zhuan flicked his sleeve and didn't intend to continue asking. The moment Tang Wuxi gave him the route map, his divine sense felt that something was wrong. This route map had been altered by Tang Wuxi. However, Zhuan didn't care. He knew that Tang Wuxi would come to his door sooner or later. Even if Tang Wuxi found an 8 steps void sky expert, he wouldn't be afraid. At this moment, he was courageous and was not afraid of Tang Wuxi coming. He was only afraid that Tang Wuxi wouldn't come. "Senior, wait, I'll talk." Actually, when we entered the temple, we happened to see Tang Wuxi's 2 brothers leave the temple and go to the danger zone. Because my wife's 5 senses are naturally much stronger than others, and those 2 didn't care much about us 2 cultivators, they just put a simple restriction. At that time, my wife heard that those 2 were going to the danger zone to look for the space-time key. We didn't know about the space-time key at all, and we didn't particularly care. After entering the temple, when we bought the route map, we asked about the space-time key. Who knew that Tang Yu, who had a normal attitude, would suddenly flip out and ask for a sky-high price? Her purpose was to kill us. Only then did we know that the so-called space-time key was probably not simple. Speaking of this, the male cultivator looked at Zhuan again. When he found that Yun was still indifferent and calm, a hint of disappointment appeared in his eyes. Originally, he thought that this information was very useful and could gain the favor of this senior in front of him. When the time came, he would be happy to take them through the danger zone. Chapter 22-27. Tang Wing. Although Zhuan looked calm on the surface, his heart was in turmoil. He didn't expect to hear news about the space-time key here. However, he was very clear that the destination of the map he obtained wasn't this danger zone. One had to know that this danger zone was only formed recently and was man-made. It couldn't possibly be the space-time key he obtained from the Devourer King's map. In that case, the space-time key in this danger zone was very likely another one. Thinking of this, Zhuowen's heart was filled with excitement. The two of you aren't safe here. Why don't you come with me? I'll bring you out of this place. How about it? Zhuan looked at the male cultivator and said indifferently. How could he not see the male cultivator's intentions? Since this male cultivator had provided him with such important information, there was nothing wrong with him bringing this pair of Dao companions to the other side of the danger zone. The Dao companions were immediately overjoyed and hurriedly cupped their fists at Zhuan to thank him. Zhuan waved his hand and said, "There's no need for that. The danger zone is very dangerous. You two can endure it for a while and enter my spirit ring." The Dao companions naturally didn't have any objections and entered Zhuowen's spirit ring. After putting away the Dao companions, Zhuan leaped up and rushed towards the danger zone ahead. Although he knew that the map Tang Wuxi gave him was fake, he still planned to follow it to the end. Only by doing so could he completely lure out Tang Wuxi and his two elder brothers. He believed that Tang Wuxi definitely didn't know much about the space-time key. The main clue should be on his two elder brothers. The moment he entered the danger zone, the galactic wind blades were like a swarm of locusts. They swept over and smashed in front of Zhuan. Zhuowen activated his divine power shield and blocked all the incoming starry sky wind blades. Now that Zhuowen's cultivation base had reached the 6th stage void sky realm and the unification of heaven's realm, his strength was stronger than ordinary 7th stage void sky realm cultivators. Although these galactic wind blades were powerful, they didn't pose any threat to Zhuan. Following the route on the map, Zhuan slowly moved towards the depths of the danger zone. As he continued to go deeper, Zhuan found that the surrounding starry sky wind blades were getting more and more terrifying, giving him a suffocating feeling. Generally speaking, the correct route would definitely be relatively safe. However, the starry sky wind blades around Zhuan weren't safe at all. Zhuan stopped when he was still 100 meters away from the end of the route. The starry sky wind blades here had reached an extremely terrifying level. They were so dense that even the line of sight was blocked by these starry sky wind blades, making it difficult to see the scenery in front of them. 100 meters in front of Zhuowen, a large area of space collapsed and appeared in front of him. The center of the collapsed starry sky was a void. It was pitch black, like a bottomless abyss. If one fell in, they would not be able to come out. Zhuowen looked at the collapsing starry sky in front of him with fear. This was definitely the first time he had seen such a thing in his life. It was simply too huge and too terrifying. He had a feeling that if he fell into the collapse of the starry sky, he wouldn't be able to get out. Zhuowen stood silently in front of the collapsed starry sky, the coldness in his eyes becoming more and more intense. "Ha! You really came here according to the route. I really admire your courage." A cold voice sounded. Zhuowen didn't need to guess to know that the owner of this voice was Tang Wuxi. Turning around, Zhuowen saw 3 figures appear in front of him. The one on the far left was a middle-aged scholar in a green robe. Zhuowen was no stranger to him. It was Tang Wuxi. At this moment, Tang Wuxi was looking at Zhuowen with eyes full of ridicule. It was as if Zhuowen was his plaything that he could play with at will. The other 2 were dressed in black robes. One of them had snow-white hair and his eyes revealed an aura of vicissitudes. The other person was younger and had a gloomy gaze. At this moment, he was staring straight at Zhuowen. Third brother, you want us to deal with this 6 steps void trash? Isn't this a little too much? The man with snow-white hair narrowed his eyes and said with some displeasure, Big brother, don't underestimate this kid. He has a big secret. When I fought with him in the temple before, he was at a disadvantage. You also know that there is a multiple mountains great array in the temple, but I still wasn't his opponent. This kid is not simple. And this kid can casually take out a level 7 divine pill. This shows how rich he is, Tang Wuxi hurriedly said. Third brother, aren't you too useless? Although you have just advanced to the 7 steps void realm, you can't even defeat this 6 steps void realm trash in the temple. You really disappoint me. Second brother will let you see how I capture this piece of trash. The man with a sinister gaze standing at the side grinned. The aura of his entire body erupted, and the smell of blood gushed out. His entire person was like a vigorous cheetah that suddenly shot out and rushed explosively toward Zhuowen. The middle-aged man with snow-white hair didn't stop him. Instead, he looked indifferently at Zhuowen. He was very clear about his second brother's strength. His second brother's cultivation had already reached the peak of the 7 steps void realm and was only a step away from the 8 steps void realm. Even if this white-clothed youth was not simple, he couldn't be much stronger than his second brother. Zhuowen looked indifferently at the man with a gloomy face. With a wave of his sleeve, he immediately summoned the Thunder Fire Sword from his spirit ring. Xiao He, it's time for you to perform, Zhuowen said with a smile. Xiao He patted his chest and grinned, leave this kind of trash to this dragon lord. With that, Xiao He turned into a terrifying sword light. Thunder and fire energy fell like rain and revolved around the Thunder Fire Sword. It looked terrifying and powerful. Boom! The Thunder Fire Sword was extremely fast and blasted in front of the gloomy man. The disdain in the gloomy man's eyes instantly disappeared and became extremely serious. The terrifying aura on the Thunder Fire Sword made him tremble with fear. Therefore, he didn't even think about it and used his natal divine weapon to block the strange attack of the Thunder Fire Sword. Bang! 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 The Thunder Fire Sword slashed out dozens of times in an instant. Each slash contained a terrifying power. The gloomy man was exhausted. He spat out a mouthful of blood and was suddenly sent flying. His eyes were filled with shock. Retreat! When the shadowy man realized how terrifying the Thunder Fire Sword was, he immediately planned to retreat. Unfortunately, the Thunder Fire Sword didn't give him the chance to retreat. The sword light was like water as it suddenly swept out. The Thunder Fire energy was like a storm as it poured down on the shadowy man. This time, the gloomy man was really suffering. The corners of his mouth curled into a bitter smile. He was barely able to resist the terrifying attack of the Thunder Fire Sword. I remember you said that I was trash just now, right? You even said that you would be able to capture me in a few moves. It's been so long now. Why haven't you captured me yet? With his hands behind his back, Jun looked down at the gloomy man who was trapped by the Thunder Fire Sword. The corners of his mouth curled into a mocking smile. The gloomy man didn't know what to say. He didn't know that Jun actually had such a terrifying divine weapon that could suppress him so ruthlessly. Chapter 22-28 Crushbam. Just as the shadowy man was retreating step by step, a terrifying attack suddenly blasted over and slammed into the Thunder Fire Sword, causing it to involuntarily retreat repeatedly. Xiao He's gaze was extremely unfriendly as he looked at the middle-aged man with snow-white hair not far away. It was this guy who had attacked him just now. When the gloomy man saw that the Thunder Fire Sword had been repelled, he hurriedly returned to the side of the middle-aged man with snow-white hair. He said, "Big brother, this kid really is sinister. He actually possesses such a powerful divine artifact. No wonder third brother wasn't his match in the temple." The middle-aged man with snow-white hair had his hands behind his back as he looked at the Thunder Fire Sword and Jun arrogantly and said indifferently, "You really have some ability. No wonder you dare to be so arrogant with a mere 6 steps void sky. It turns out that you rely on this divine tool." Although the middle-aged man was praising Zhuowen, there was no trace of praise in his eyes. Zhuowen could even see a trace of contempt and disdain in his eyes. Obviously, This middle-aged man looked down on Zhuowen's behavior of relying on a divine tool. A divine tool is also a part of one's strength. This is completely understandable. On the other hand, the three of you first gave me a fake map, and now you want to bully me with numbers? Don't you feel ashamed? Zhuowen retorted sarcastically. The winner is king and the loser is a bandit. The winner is king. So what if we bully you with numbers? You are not a match for the three of us, so naturally you will die. What is there to be ashamed of? The middle-aged man smiled slightly, not feeling the slightest bit ashamed. Thus, although your divine tool is strong, it is still slightly inferior to the three of us. Brother Zhuo, how about this? You give us your spirit rings and I will give you the correct map. What do you think? Tang Wuxi suddenly interrupted. Zhuowen looked at Tang Wuxi as if he was an idiot and said indifferently, "Do you think I am a pig brain like you? It is impossible to give you my spirit rings, but your spirit rings will be completely left behind today." Tang Wuxi laughed as if he was looking at the biggest joke in the world. Obviously, he did not believe Zhuowen's words. Although his second brother, Tang Wuzong, was knocked back by the Thunder Fire Sword, he still had his eldest brother, Tang Wuing. His big brother, Tang Wuing, was the strongest of the three. His cultivation had already reached the early stage of the Void Sky 8th step. Even in the Northern Universe, he was a well-known figure. Of course, the three of them weren't so strong in the past. But since they obtained the resources from the Secret Realm, their cultivations had advanced by leaps and bounds, and they'd shockingly entered the ranks of the experts of the Northern Universe. Tang Wuing also smiled. His right hand suddenly blasted out toward Xiao He without holding back. Xiao He sneered and commanded the Thunderfire Sword to meet the attack fearlessly. The terrifying Thunderfire energy swept out like a whirlpool of flames, looking exceptionally terrifying. Bang! However, the moment the Thunderfire Sword came into contact with Tang Wuing's attack, a sliver of golden thread, like a nimble snake, suddenly wrapped around the entire Thunderfire Sword and bound it. Moreover, this golden thread was extremely mysterious and extremely tough. No matter how terrifying the Thunderfire Sword's energy was, it was actually blocked by this golden thread, using softness to overcome hardness. Zhuowen looked at the golden thread in astonishment. This golden thread was definitely not simple. It was actually able to bind the Thunderfire Sword. This was somewhat inconceivable. Although Tang Wuing's cultivation was only at the early stage of the Void Sky 8th step, this guy had a lot of treasures. Not to mention this golden thread, Tang Wuing didn't rely on his own strength to send Xiao He flying. He relied on the silver glove in his hand. Thinking of this, Zhuowen felt a little amused. This Tang Wuing was really thick-skinned. He relied on an external object to attack, but was extremely disdainful and contemptuous of Zhuowen's Thunderfire Sword. This person was really egotistical. Let's see what other tricks you have. Tang Wuing's heroic spirit soared to the sky. After seeing the golden thread bind the Thunderfire Sword, he grinned and directly rushed toward Zhuowen. Tang Wuxi and Tang Wuzong stood at the back and looked at Tang Wuing's actions with reverence. In their eyes, Tang Wuing was an invincible existence because he'd even killed an initial stage Void Heaven Realm expert at the 8th level of the Void Heaven Realm, let alone this little kid who was merely at the 6th level of the Void Heaven Realm. This kid is dead for sure. However, third brother, do you think this kid really has something good on him? Tang Wuzong looked at all of this silently and grinned. Tang Wuxi nodded and said, "Second brother, don't worry. This kid definitely has something good on him. You have to know that in the temple, this person took out a level 7 divine pill to exchange for the map without blinking. Although we can take out a level 7 divine pill, we definitely won't be willing to exchange it for a mere map." Tang Wuzong smiled slightly and believed Tang Wuxi's words. The two of them talked back and forth as if Zhuowen was already in their pockets. Unfortunately, the relaxed atmosphere between the two of them was quickly broken. Bang! A muffled groan was suddenly heard and a black figure was quickly sent flying backwards. Tang Wuzong and Tang Wuxi's expressions changed slightly. With a glance, they saw that the person who was flying towards them was none other than their elder brother, Tang Wuing. The two of them shouted and unleashed their divine power. Their divine power transformed into two giant hands and caught Tang Wuing, who was flying backward, in the giant hands made of divine power. Unfortunately, the moment the huge hands made contact with Tang Wuing's body, a boundless and terrifying power crushed them and shattered the huge hands formed by the two of them. Puchi! Tang Wuing's body crashed heavily onto the two of them. The two of them spat out a mouthful of blood and were forced to retreat a few thousand meters before they could barely stop themselves. When the two of them looked back at Tang Wuing, who was in front of them, the two of them were dumbstruck. Tang Wuing's eyes had turned white and the front of his clothes was already dyed red with blood. His whole body was twitching and trembling. The injuries he had suffered could not be described as light. However, when the two of them raised their heads and looked toward Zhuowen's direction, their dumbstruck expression was instantly replaced by shock. They saw that a slender elder had appeared beside Zhuowen at some point in time. This elder's aura was as vast as the sea and extremely terrifying. It was even more terrifying than Tang Wuing's aura. Tang Wuzong and Tang Wuxi immediately knew that this elder's cultivation was definitely above the early stage of the Void Sky 8th step. Moreover, from the way this elder stood respectfully behind Zhuowen, it could be seen that this elder was probably this white-clothed youth's servant. However, the two of them could not figure out how this terrifyingly powerful elder appeared. And this elder who stood respectfully behind Zhuowen was none other than Chen Changsheng. "Master, do you want me to kill these three people?" Chen Changsheng asked respectfully. However, Zhuowen shook his head and waved his sleeve to put away the thunder fire sword. Chapter 22-29. Small world, imprison the three of them, Zhuowen ordered. Without another word, Chen Changsheng used his surging divine power to imprison Tang Wuzong and Tang Wuxi. Due to Tang Wuing's severe injuries, he was extremely weak, so even if he didn't use his divine power to imprison him, he wouldn't pose much of a threat to Zhuowen. "Who exactly are you?" Tang Wuing struggled to prop himself up and looked at Zhuowen. His eyes were filled with bitterness and regret. He knew clearly that he had bitten off more than he could chew this time. Possessing a servant at the late stage of the Void Sky 8th step, this person's background was definitely earth-shattering. He wasn't someone he could afford to offend. At the same time, Tang Wuing cursed his third brother, Tang Wuxi, in his heart. If it wasn't for Tang Wuxi, they wouldn't have ended up like this. "You don't have to ask who I am. I only have one thing to ask you. If your answer satisfies me, I can let the three of you live," Zhuowen said indifferently. Hearing this, Tang Wuing's eyes shone with a desire to live. He quickly said, "Sir, please ask away. As long as I know, I'll definitely tell you everything. My question is very simple. Do you know about the space-time key? If there's even the slightest bit of falsehood, I'll kill you immediately." At this point, Zhuowen's eyes shone with a chilling light. Feeling the chilling light in Zhuowen's eyes, Tang Wuing's heart trembled. He knew clearly that this white-clothed young man would do as he said. Moreover, he wasn't a fool. Since this white-clothed young man asked about the space-time key, he must have heard something from someone else. If he lied, he would be digging his own grave. Thinking of this, Tang Wuing's body trembled. He quickly said, "I know about the space-time key. The reason why I often enter this dangerous zone is because of the space-time key." Zhuowen looked at Tang Wuing silently and didn't say anything. Obviously, he was waiting for him to continue. Tang Wuing was a quick-witted person as well, so he naturally understood what Zhuowen meant, and he continued. "My lord, there's something you're unaware of. Ever since the battle between Lord Brahma and the mysterious woman, this expanse of the starry sky has become a dangerous area. Starry sky collapses and starry sky blades are everywhere, and they're numerous in number. However, it is precisely because of the battle between the two of them that they unintentionally opened up a tunnel in the starry sky. That tunnel is extremely well hidden. If one does not personally enter the tunnel, it is impossible to discover it. On the other side of the tunnel is a small world with extremely dense energy. In this small world, there are many cultivation resources and a huge starry sky divine vein. This small world is guarded by a white key lock. I don't know what the key is. I only know that it's the space-time key from the words engraved in the place where it was placed." After listening, Zhuowen was deep in thought. Tang Wuing didn't seem to be lying. In other words, there really was a space-time key in the danger zone. Bring me there, Zhuowen said indifferently. Tang Wuing already knew that Zhuowen would say that, so he wasn't surprised. Instead, he looked at the restrained Tang Wuzong and Tang Wuxi and said, "My lord, these two are my brothers. They have nothing to do with this matter. My lord, do you think you can let them go first? After I obtain the space-time key, I will naturally let you go. For this, I can swear to the heavenly Tao," Zhuowen said casually. Tang Wuing was relieved when he saw Zhuowen swear to the heavenly Tao. An oath to the heavenly Tao was the strictest, and the consequences of violating it were also the most severe. Therefore, he didn't think that Zhuowen would violate his oath. "All right, my lord, follow me." Tang Wuing's injuries had recovered slightly. He stood up and cupped his hands respectfully at Zhuowen before leading the way. Because Tang Wuing had the correct route, the group didn't encounter any powerful obstacles along the way. After about 4 hours, Tang Wuing arrived at a small collapsed space that was about 3 feet in size. He pointed at the darkness within the collapsed space and said, "My lord, the entrance to the small world is inside here. You go in first," Zhuowen said indifferently. Tang Wuing already knew that Zhuowen would say that, so he wasn't surprised. After glancing at Zhuowen, he jumped into the collapsed space. After about half an incense stick's time, Zhuowen received a message from Tang Wuing from his communication jade amulet. The gist of it was that Tang Wuing had completely entered the small world. "Let's go in as well." Zhuowen glanced at Qin Changxing. The latter rolled up his sleeves and swept up the restrained Tang Wuxi and Tang Wuzong before jumping into the collapsed space. Zhuowen followed closely behind. The moment he entered the space collapse, Zhuowen immediately felt a rapid drop. It was as if he was falling from a high altitude. He wanted to circulate his divine power and activate the torch dragon wings to weaken the force of the descent, but he realized that it was futile. No matter how he circulated his divine power, the force of the descent didn't weaken at all. Instead, it became stronger and stronger. The speed of his descent also became faster and faster, reaching an unbelievable level. After about an hour, the speed of his descent suddenly decreased. In the end, it seemed to have stopped. Zhuowen stepped on solid ground and was as steady as a mountain. The moment Zhuowen stabilized his body, a refreshing fragrance assailed his nostrils. Zhuowen couldn't help but reveal an intoxicated expression. At this moment, what appeared in front of Zhuowen was a valley filled with birdsong and fragrant flowers. There were streams and waterfalls, small bridges and flowing water, clouds and mist, and green mountains and clear waters. It was like a paradise on earth. Moreover, Zhuowen could feel that the energy in this place was extremely vigorous. It was much more vigorous than the Zhonglan Mystery Land. Of course, the main function of the Zhonglan Mystery Land was to increase one's comprehension. However, the cultivation energy was not much different from the outside world. However, the energy in this small world was much more vigorous than the outside world. If one cultivated in this small world, they would definitely advance at a tremendous pace. Other than that, Yuan also saw many high-level divine medicines, supreme-grade god stones, and other rare items in this small world. There were quite a lot of them in this small world. At this moment, Yuan was standing on top of a protruding rock. Tang Wuing was not far away from the rock. When he saw Zhuowen and the others enter, he hurried over to welcome them. "Where's the space-time key now?" Zhuowen asked plainly. Although the resources around this small world tempted him, he was still eager to know the location of the space-time key. Tang Wuing hurriedly said, "Sir, follow me. The space-time key is in the core region of this small world. However, the space-time key is protected by an extremely powerful array formation. Furthermore, there are many dangers within the array formation. Sir, you have to be careful." Zhuowen didn't say anything, but his heart skipped a beat. From Tang Wuing's words, it seemed like the space-time key wasn't easy to obtain. Of course, if the space-time key was easy to obtain, Tang Wuing would have gotten it a long time ago. It would be impossible for him to wait until now. In the central region of the small world, there was an extremely huge valley. At the entrance of the valley, there was a rather powerful restriction. Chapter 2230. Ice Tower. My lord, the space-time key is in this valley. Tang Wuing stood at the entrance of the valley and pointed towards the valley as he spoke respectfully. However, Yuan could sense fear in Tang Wuing's eyes. It was obvious that Tang Wuing was extremely fearful of this valley, or else he wouldn't reveal such an expression. You've been in there before? Yuan asked. Tang Wuing hurriedly replied, I've indeed been in there, but I didn't go far before I was forced to leave due to the terrifying cold air. The cold air here is terrifying. Please be careful when you go in. Yuan was rather surprised. If there was cold air in the valley, why didn't he feel it at all when he was at the entrance? You go in first. Yuan still didn't trust Tang Wuing and indicated for him to go in first. Tang Wuing had no choice but to enter the valley under Yuan's watch, with Yuan following closely behind. The moment Yuan stepped into the valley, his entire body trembled as a bone-chilling cold assaulted him. Only then did Yuan realize that the scenery inside the valley was another world. It was a world of ice and snow, with countless icebergs standing tall in the surroundings. The air was filled with a bone-chilling cold. Even Yuan felt a chill that made him shiver. The ground was a smooth ice surface, like a clear mirror. Yuan could clearly see the details of his face when he lowered his head as he walked on the ice surface. Chen Changsheng brought Tang Wuzong and Tang Wuxi and walked at the back. Tang Wuing brought Yuan's group and walked for an hour before stopping. My lord, the cold air here is too terrifying, I can't withstand it at all. Just follow the icebergs in front and you'll find the location of the space-time key. Tang Wuing suddenly stopped and said with trembling lips. Yuan glanced at the shivering Tang Wuing. Tang Wuxi and Tang Wuzong, who were brought along by Chen Changsheng, were in an even worse state. Tang Wuxi had already fainted from the cold. Even Yuan was having a hard time resisting the cold air. Yuan's eyes flickered as he nodded at Tang Wuing and said, You may leave first. Tang Wuing felt as if he had been granted amnesty. He repeatedly cupped his fists at Yuan, then led Tang Wuzong and Tang Wuxi back the way they came. Master, the cold air here is too terrifying. Do you still intend to continue? Chen Changsheng frowned. Yuan nodded and said, Let's move on. I must get the space-time key. You can hide in the Zhonglan mystery realm for now. However, Chen Changsheng shook his head and said, Sir, there's no need. I can still take it, but I'm a little puzzled. There's no information about the space-time key in this valley, so why is Tang Wuing so sure that this place is the space-time key? Yuan stared blankly for a moment before revealing a cold glint in his eyes. Chen Changsheng was right. Tang Wuing could only last up to this point and there was only a vast expanse of whiteness in front of him. How could Tang Wuing be so sure that there was a space-time divine key in front of him? There's something wrong with Tang Wuing, he might have purposely led us here. Yuan's gaze slightly changed, but he quickly felt that he might have been wrong. Perhaps before Tang Wuing came in, the cold air here wasn't so dense, but as time passed, the cold air became more and more terrifying. Tang Wuing didn't seem to be lying. If he was lying, Yuan would be able to tell at a glance. After all, his divine sense was now much stronger than ordinary cultivators. Tang Wuing's divine sense, which was only at the initial stage of Void Sky 8 steps, was simply trash compared to his. But where did this cold air come from? Why did it become more and more terrifying? Yuan advanced another few hundred meters and finally couldn't take the terrifying cold air any longer. The surface of his skin began to be covered with thick icicles, and his blood seemed to be about to be frozen by this terrifying cold air. Chen Changsheng wasn't feeling very well either, but this guy had been holding it in and didn't say anything. Yuan sighed slightly and summoned the Zhonglan's secret realm to keep Chen Changsheng. At the same time, Yuan summoned the Thunder Fire Sword, borrowing the heat of the Thunder Fire Sword to resist the terrifying cold air in the surroundings. Although Xiao He was obviously dissatisfied with being summoned to resist the cold air, this guy didn't mean what he said. Although he said that he wasn't willing, he still released the energy of the Thunder Fire Sword to surround Yuan. After advancing another 1,000 meters, the cold air was too terrifying, and even the surroundings were stirred up by a snowstorm. The Thunder Fire Sword couldn't withstand it, and was eventually stored in Yuan's spirit ring. Jin then summoned his doppelganger, Devour. Devour was already a thunder fire true god, and he had also awakened the royal bloodline, which made him extremely powerful. He believed that with the strength of Devour's physical body, he should be able to withstand the increasingly terrifying cold air. Indeed, after Devour came out, although the cold air was terrifying, it didn't have much effect on Devour. In the wind and snow, Zhuowen walked for another 1,000 meters before finally coming to a stop. His gaze landed on the end of the path, where a sharp ice tower stood. The surface of the ice tower was as smooth as a mirror, reflecting dazzling light. Zhuowen could see clearly that the tip of the ice tower was releasing terrifying cold air unceasingly. The space-time key should be in that ice tower. Zhuowen's real body leaped onto Devour's head, and Devour followed his order, dashing toward the ice tower. Devour's body was so massive that after revealing his real body, Zhuowen had shrunk his body to around 100 meters, which was the smallest size that Devour could shrink to. However, even so, 100 meters was still huge. The moment Devour came within 10 meters of the ice tower, Zhuowen had a bad premonition. Then he found that Devour's limbs began to freeze, turning into smooth ice sculptures. Zhuowen's real body, who was standing on Devour's head, felt a cold air rising from the soles of his feet. Right after that, he found that his feet were frozen. Moreover, the freezing trend was spreading to his thighs and even his upper body. Furthermore, Zhuowen was horrified to discover that as his feet continued to freeze into ice sculptures, the ice sculptures would shatter into countless ice shards when the wind blew past. In just a blink of an eye, Zhuowen's thighs had turned into ice chips, turning into nothingness. Not only Zhuowen's real body, but Devour's limbs also began to shatter into ice chips after being frozen. Half of his 4 massive beast hooves had disappeared in just a blink of an eye. At this moment, Zhuowen had only one feeling in his heart: so cold. It was a bone-chilling cold. It was the first time in his life that he had ever felt so cold. Zhuowen roared indignantly, immediately retrieving his real body into the Zhonglan's secret domain. Devour faced the sky and roared. The extreme lightning and fire power in his body gushed out crazily, preventing the terrifying cold air from eroding his limbs. Zhuowen understood clearly that if he let the cold air invade his body, Devour's limbs would be destroyed. Moreover, it wouldn't be as simple as that. It could even endanger his life. With that thought in mind, Zhuowen released his lightning and fire power to cover his entire body. The terrifying lightning and fire power gushed out like a flood, which looked magnificent. At the same time, the cold air that had been spreading from Devour's limbs slowed down as Zhuowen was pouring out his lightning and flame power. Chapter 2231. Fatty, I have to get out of this place as soon as possible. Otherwise, I'll probably die here. Zhuowen's eyes were filled with fright. He controlled Devour's body, trying to get away from the ice tower. However, just as Zhuowen was about to turn around, his soul consciousness accidentally scanned the back of the ice tower. It was a Daokong hole. Zhuowen's eyes twinkled. The surface of the ice tower was as smooth as a mirror, without any flaws. However, there was a hole on the back of the tower. Zhuowen suspected that this was the only entrance to the ice tower. Thinking of this, Zhuowen revealed a hesitant expression. He knew that if the hole was not the entrance, he would miss the opportunity to leave the range of the ice pagoda if he rashly went in. The chances of him dying would be too great. However, this ice tower could hide a space-time key. Zhuowen didn't want to give up. Let's take a gamble. Zhuowen's eyes shot out a sharp light. His mind flickered, and Devour roared, dashing toward the ice tower. At this moment, Devour's 4 beast hooves had turned into ice sculptures. While flying, they shattered into countless ice fragments. When Devour reached the back of the ice tower, the cold air had spread to his lower body, which began to shatter. Get in. With only his upper body left, Devour roared and dashed into the hole on the back of the ice tower. The moment Devour got into the hole, his upper body was frozen by the cold air. Then, it shattered, leaving only a massive head. Phew. This place isn't affected by the cold air outside. Devour exhaled in relief. He knew he had made the right bet. He summoned Zhuowen's real body. His feet, which had been shattered by the cold air, had recovered completely. After all, at his level, as long as his god's soul wasn't destroyed, the wounds on his body weren't a big deal. Devour's head glowed with a black light. Then, his body began to recover. However, Devour's body was too big. It would take a long time for him to recover completely. Thus, Juan put him into his spirit ring first. At this moment, Juan began to examine his surroundings. He saw that he was surrounded by crystal-clear ice walls. The ice wall was made up of blocks of ice bricks. It looked ancient and mysterious. Although the surrounding cold air was dense, it was nothing compared to the terrifying cold air outside the ice tower. Juan looked into the depths of the passageway. It was pitch black, and he couldn't even see his own fingers. He couldn't see the end of it. Juan knew that if he wanted to reach the top of the pagoda, he had to move forward. Juan summoned the Thunder Fire Sword and the Blood Fairy Sword and said, "You too, protect me." Xiao He patted his chest and assured Juan that there would be no problem. The Blood Fairy Sword was also a bootlicker. Juan didn't have a choice. Devour had only one head left, and it would take him a long time to recover. At this moment he could only rely on his real body. His real body wasn't particularly strong. At most, it was stronger than the Blood Fairy Sword, but it might be weaker than the Thunder Fire Sword. Thus, he could only ask these two guys to protect him. As for Qin Changxing, Yuan didn't summon him. He didn't know what was going on inside the ice tower, so he didn't want to use all of his trump cards. Zhuan moved forward slowly along the passageway. However, as he moved forward, the shock in Zhuan's eyes became more and more intense. Because on both sides of the ice wall, there were frozen corpses with ferocious faces. From the clothes on these corpses, Zhuan could tell that these corpses were definitely not people of this era. They must be people from a very long time ago. Although these corpses were all frozen, Zhuan could feel that these corpses were definitely experts when they were alive. Along the way, in addition to the human corpses, Zhuan also saw many giant starry sky beasts. This passageway was winding and spiraling upwards. After walking for 6 hours, Zhuan finally stopped. That was because he had already reached the top of the ice tower, the end of the tunnel. And at the top of the dome, Zhuan saw a shocking scene. On the crystal-clear dome, 2 terrifying giant starry sky beasts were confronting each other. Unfortunately, the scene of these 2 giant starry sky beasts confronting each other was completely frozen on the dome. The reason why Zhuan was shocked was because he wasn't unfamiliar with these 2 giant starry sky beasts. The one on the left was covered in golden light and had a sharp horn on its head. Wasn't that Devour? Moreover, the golden scales on Devour's body indicated that it was Devour King, the king of the Devouring clan. Opposite Devour King was a majestic 5-clawed divine dragon. This 5-clawed divine dragon wasn't any smaller than Devour King. In fact, to some extent, it was even bigger than Devour King. However, what left Zhuan speechless was that in the middle of the 2 giant starry sky beasts' confrontation, a round fatty was also frozen. This fatty was simply too fat. He was so round that he didn't even have a waist. His entire body was like a ball, and the fat on his face was like a small ball. From afar, it looked like a small ball was piled on top of a big ball. It looked like a snowman in the snow. It was a hilarious sight. The moment Zhuan's gaze fell on the fatty, his eyes narrowed. This was because he noticed that the fatty was tightly gripping a white key in his hand. Needless to say, even if Zhuan hadn't seen this white key before, he could guess that it was the time-space divine key. Zhuan looked at the Devour King and the 5-clawed golden dragon on both sides of the fatty. He knew that these 2 giant starry sky beasts were fighting over the time-space divine key in the fatty's hand. However, for some unknown reason, they were frozen by the terrifying cold air. At the top of the ice tower, other than the 5-clawed golden dragon, the Devour King, and the fatty, there was nothing else. It was cold and empty. Xiaohe, try and see if you can break the ice on the dome, Zhuan said to the Thunderfire Sword. Although Xiaohe wasn't very willing, he still followed Zhuan's instructions. He turned into a ray of sword light and blasted at the ice. Boom! With a muffled sound, the Thunderfire Sword was sent flying and fell to the ground. Then, Zhuan heard Xiaohe's cursing voice. The content was naturally about how strong the ice was. Zhuan looked at the undamaged ice on the dome, and his eyes revealed a trace of shock. The ice on the dome was actually so strong. The Thunderfire Sword's full force attack actually didn't leave a single mark on the ice. Brat, this ice is too strong. This Dragon Lord can't break it. You have to think of a way. Xiao He floated beside Zhuan again and said in an extremely displeased tone. Zhuan scratched his head awkwardly. His powerful divine sense spread out and scanned the surroundings. He knew that there was definitely a way to obtain the time-space divine key. It was just that he hadn't found it yet. Chapter 2232. Level 9. Zhuan's perception was extremely sharp. When the fat man's eyes rolled around, he raised his head and his sharp gaze met the fat man's. The fat man wasn't afraid. Instead, he looked straight at Zhuan. His eyes blinked as if he was telling Zhuan that he was still alive. At the same time, a weak voice came from Zhuan's sea of consciousness. Fellow Taoist, can you do me a favor? Zhuan looked at the fat man. He knew that the owner of this divine sense should be the fat man who was sealed in the ice dome. However, Zhuan was surprised that the fat man was still alive even though the Devourer King and the five-clawed golden dragon were frozen to death. He knew very well how terrifying the ice walls inside the ice tower were. They weren't any weaker than the cold air outside the tower. Moreover, the fat man was holding the time-space divine key. The time-space divine key that the Devourer King and the five-clawed golden dragon fought over had ended up in the fat man's hands. He didn't believe that the fat man was a simple character. Fellow Taoist, don't stare at me in a daze. Although I'm very handsome, you should wake up and do me a small favor. The fat man's divine sense came again. Zhuan pondered for a while and replied, Why should I help you? The fat man chuckled and said, Fellow Taoist, you should be here for the time-space divine key in my hands, right? Since you can come here, it means that you're not simple. If you help me, you'll be helping yourself to the time-space divine key. Zhuan looked at the white key in the fat man's hand and said indifferently, Do you know a way to break this ice layer? The fat man smiled and said, I know, of course I know. And the method is very simple. Let me tell you, the reason why this ice tower was formed is because of the ice origin at the bottom of this ice tower. This ice essence is good stuff. It is the most primitive power of ice and the origin of all ice-type power. Back then, I was too careless and didn't notice the ice essence inside, which led to me being trapped here. As long as you find the origin of ice and completely isolate the power of the origin of ice, the frozen world of this ice pagoda will completely collapse and I will regain my freedom. When the time comes, I will give you the space-time key. Zhuan's heart was filled with shock. The origin source was a mysterious and unfathomable power. In the starry skies, every origin source power was rare. Now that the fat man said that the ice tower had the ice origin, Zhuan subconsciously felt that it was impossible. However, when he thought of the terrifying cold qi in this place, which had penetrated deep into his bones and even his soul, it was extremely oppressive. This was the first time he had felt such a terrifying cold. He knew that other than the origin of ice mentioned by the fatty, there was no other explanation for this. You'll just die if you go there. The fat man didn't think so. He said leisurely, That's because you're too ignorant. The power of the ice origin isn't as strong as before. You saw those frozen bodies from the bottom of the ice tower to the top, didn't you? Even the legendary kings of the Dragon Clan and the Devouring Clan were frozen. To seal so many experts in ice, even if it's the ice origin source, it must have exhausted all of its strength and energy. Now is the moment when the ice origin source is at its weakest, and it's also a rare opportunity to subdue it. Of course, if you're afraid, I won't force you. Then, the fat man closed his eyes. It seemed that he wasn't in a hurry to let Zhuan save him. Zhuan knitted his brows. He had gone through untold hardships to get to this ice tower. He couldn't go back empty-handed. Although Zhuan didn't trust the fat man, he had no choice but to trust him. After all, he knew nothing about this ice tower. He didn't know anything about it. Where's the ice origin? Asked Zhuan in a low-pitched voice. Zhuan made up his mind. First, he would ask for the location of the ice origin. After he got in, he would decide if he should take action or not. If it was too dangerous, he would leave immediately and come back when he was stronger. The fat man opened his eyes, which revealed an undetectable joy. He sent his voice to Shi Yen. The ice origin is at the center of the top. There's a shielding formation there. There's an altar inside the shielding formation. The ice origin is in that altar. Shielding formation? Zhuowen's eyes darkened. He didn't feel any fluctuation of the shielding formation here. He thought the fat man was lying. Ignorance is blameless. You don't feel any fluctuation of the shielding formation, so you think I'm lying? The fat man sent his voice discontentedly. Zhuowen didn't say anything. He just nodded, indicating that he did think so. Take another 10 steps forward. If you still think I'm lying, then I have nothing to say, snorted the fat man. Zhuowen frowned. After thinking about it, he still followed the fat man's instructions and took another 10 steps forward. When he took the 10th step, he narrowed his eyes. He could vaguely feel the fluctuation of the shielding formation. The fluctuation was too weak. If it wasn't for his divine sense, which was far stronger than ordinary cultivators, he wouldn't have been able to detect the fluctuation of the shielding formation. What a hidden shielding formation. Could this shielding formation be a level 9 formation? Zhuowen was shocked. A shielding formation that he couldn't detect was definitely a level 9 formation. Zhuowen was now a level 7 formation master. Coupled with his terrifying divine sense, even a level 8 formation wouldn't be able to escape his eyes. However, Zhuowen hadn't noticed the shielding formation. If it wasn't for the fat man's reminder, he wouldn't have even noticed it. Other than level 9 formations, Zhuowen knew that no other shielding formation could do it. Of course, Zhuowen wasn't more surprised that the shielding formation was a level 9 formation. Instead, it was because the fat man could see through the shielding formation at a glance. Didn't that mean that the fat man's formation Dao was above him? He was at least a level 8 formation master, or even a level 9 formation master. This is a level 9 shielding formation. With my formation Dao, it's impossible to break it. Zhuowen turned to look at the fat man on the dome and said plainly. The fat man's eyes were slightly proud. He sent a voice transmission, just listen to me from now on. This shielding formation will naturally be broken. Zhuowen looked at the fat man suspiciously. In the end, he decided to listen to him. He could feel that the fat man wasn't simple. In this ice tower, those who were sealed in ice were all dead. Even terrifying existences like the 5-clawed golden dragon and the devourer king had fallen. However, the fat man was still alive and well. This fat man must be extraordinary. Next, Zhuowen started to break the shielding formation according to the fat man's instructions. Chapter 2233. Ma Yu Jie. This fatty is indeed a level 9 divine array master. Zhuowen's eyes narrowed, but he was secretly on guard. A level 9 divine array master was extremely terrifying. Zhuowen had to be extremely careful when facing such a person. After all, if the fatty had set up some kind of trap, he would not be able to see through it. Therefore, while Zhuowen was breaking the formation according to the method the fatty had given him, he was also carefully observing with his consciousness. If there was the slightest problem, Zhuowen would immediately stop. He did not want to buy himself a ticking time bomb. However, Zhuowen was disappointed. No matter how he probed with his consciousness, he did not find any problems with the method. The moment Zhuowen withdrew his hand, there was a violent fluctuation in front of him. Then, a majestic altar appeared in front of Zhuowen. This altar was made of crystal-clear ice blocks. It looked as smooth as a mirror, and there was a cold and vicissitude aura flowing out from it. At the center of the altar, an ice-blue heart was slowly beating. Zhuowen felt an unprecedented bone-piercing chill from this heart. Although this heart was sealed in the altar, the chill filled Zhuowen's heart very clearly, making him feel a sense of reverence. This is the origin of ice. Now, follow my instructions and completely seal the origin of ice. When the time comes, this ice tower will collapse on its own. Seeing the ice-blue heart in the altar, the fatty's eyes flashed with a blazing light. He urgently transmitted his voice. Zhuan frowned slightly, then took out a broken ice lotus from his spirit ring. This was the everlasting ice lotus. Zhuan had obtained it from the top floor of Yu Wuxi's cave dwelling, the Nether Hall. It was Yu Wuxi's most important treasure. The effect of the everlasting ice lotus was indeed heaven-defying. Zhuan sat on the ice lotus and cultivated. It was easier for him to touch the starry sky laws, and his cultivation speed was many times faster than usual. Unfortunately, the everlasting ice lotus was broken when Chen Changxing, Fu Yuz, Yang Zhonghui, and the other ancestors attacked him. Its power was not as strong as before, so Zhuan had long forgotten about this everlasting ice lotus. But now, he was looking at the everlasting ice lotus with a blazing gaze. Because the moment the ice origin was opened, he could clearly feel the everlasting ice lotus's strange movements. He could feel the ice lotus's joyful mood. After all, the everlasting ice lotus was a treasure of heaven and earth. It had already gained sentience. Zhuan knew that this everlasting ice lotus was yearning for the ice origin. Shit! It's the everlasting ice lotus? Frozen in the dome, Fatty's face turned ugly. He recognized the everlasting ice lotus at a glance. The everlasting ice lotus was definitely a supreme treasure of heaven and earth. Before this ice lotus matured, its power was mediocre, but once it matured, it would become terrifying. Judging from Zhuowen's broken ice lotus, it was obviously an immature everlasting ice lotus. Moreover, it was a broken ice lotus. Generally speaking, a broken ice lotus should be worthless, but if the everlasting ice lotus encountered the ice origin, it would be a great fortune. This was because the ice origin could rapidly mature the everlasting ice lotus in a short time, turning it into a real everlasting ice lotus. This was also the reason why the fatty's face turned so ugly when he saw the everlasting ice lotus. Although the fatty was trapped because of the ice origin, who wouldn't want something as precious as the ice origin? He knew very well that his attainments in the Tao of formations far surpassed Zhuowen's. As long as Zhuowen set up the formation according to his method, he would be able to obtain the ice origin source without anyone noticing. But now, it seemed that the chances were slim. At this moment, the everlasting ice lotus buzzed and turned into a blue light. It poured into the altar and steadily landed on the ice blue heart. Zhuan could clearly see ice blue energy rays coming out of the heart and converging into the everlasting ice lotus. Zhuan stared at this scene. He didn't know much about the everlasting ice lotus, but it didn't mean that he was a fool. He could clearly feel that the everlasting ice lotus was evolving and transforming. At this moment, Zhuan was wild with joy. He didn't expect that the ice origin, which was like a flood and a fierce beast, could be dealt with so easily. He knew very well that when the everlasting ice lotus absorbed all the energy of the ice origin, it would be many times more terrifying than before. Fatty, you seem to know about the everlasting ice lotus. Can you tell me more about the everlasting ice lotus? Taking advantage of the gap between the everlasting ice lotus absorbing the ice origin, Zhuan looked up at the frozen fatty and asked indifferently, "You actually don't know the origin of the everlasting ice lotus? My God, how did you get this everlasting ice lotus?" The fatty looked at Zhuan in disbelief and the corners of his mouth twitched. Zhuan smiled embarrassedly and said, "I got it by accident." He couldn't say that he snatched it. Although this was the truth, Zhuan was naturally too embarrassed to say it. The fatty didn't doubt him and coughed dryly. "Actually, this everlasting ice lotus isn't very useful to you. Why don't you exchange it with me? I have a secondary heaven-breaking divine artifact on me. What do you think?" Zhuan secretly despised this fatty. Wasn't this guy trying to hide something? He even planned to exchange a secondary heaven-breaking divine artifact. As long as one wasn't a fool, they would know that this everlasting ice lotus was definitely more precious than a secondary heaven-breaking divine artifact. A mere secondary heaven-breaking divine artifact isn't enough. Zhuan shook his head. He already had 2 secondary heaven-breaking divine artifacts, so he didn't have much need for them. Moreover, he could sense that the everlasting ice lotus wasn't as simple as it appeared to be on the surface. He definitely wouldn't exchange this everlasting ice lotus with boundless potential. The fatty gritted his teeth and said, "How about this? 2 secondary heaven-breaking divine artifacts, 2 level 9 divine pills, and 2 level 9 divine herbs. What do you think? This is already the most generous offer I can make." Zhuowen's heart jolted. This fatty was far too rich, wasn't he? He actually had 2 secondary heaven-breaking divine artifacts, a level 9 divine pill, and a level 9 divine herb. Moreover, this fatty was able to make such an offer, so it was clear that he definitely had more valuable items on him. This was definitely a rich fatty. "My apologies, I won't exchange this everlasting ice lotus. However, you have to keep your promise. The time and space key in your hand is the price I have to pay for saving you." Zhuan looked at the white key in the fatty's hand with a meaningful expression. The fatty smiled sheepishly and said, "Don't worry, brother. I'm a man of my word, and I definitely won't go back on my word. May I know your name, brother?" "Dun." Zhuan replied calmly. "So it's Brother Zhua. You and I hit it off right away. As the saying goes, all men are brothers. It's fate that we were able to meet in this vast galaxy. My name is Ma Yujie, and people used to call me Grandpa Ma." The fatty chuckled in a friendly manner. Zhuan casually cupped his hands in greeting before walking around. At the same time, he took out 81 beast bone formation discs from his spirit ring. Using the method of 9 by 9 to return to 1, he started to set up interference formations, anti-flight formations, and death trap formations in the surroundings. Zhuan was really worried about this fatty. After all, the latter was a level 9 divine formation master. Putting aside his actual strength, just his terrifying formation skills alone were enough to make Zhuowen suffer. Chapter 2234. Absorbing the origin of ice. "Brother Zhua, this is not right. Why did you set up so many arrays here? What are you planning to do?" Ma Yujie hurriedly transmitted his voice. Zhuowen sneered in his heart, but he said helplessly, "Brother Ma, I'm just taking precautions. After the origin of ice is completely absorbed by the everlasting ice lotus, I'm afraid there will be some abnormalities in the ice tower. I have to make preparations in advance." Ma Yujie's face was a little ugly. He knew that Zhuowen was definitely doing it on purpose. He was definitely worried about him. However, he was also a little helpless, especially after he revealed his 9th-tier array Dao. No one would be too worried about him. After all, once a divine array master reached the 9th tier, his strength would be extremely powerful. It was not something that an 8th-tier array master could be compared to. After setting up all kinds of arrays, Zhuowen returned to the center of the altar. His gaze fell on the everlasting ice lotus. At this moment, the lotus on the everlasting ice lotus was no longer snowy. Instead, it was ice blue. Moreover, the aura on the ice lotus was much more terrifying than before. Even Zhuowen was a little frightened when he felt the aura on the ice lotus. In particular, the everlasting ice lotus was faintly emitting cold air. It made Zhuowen feel that if he came into contact with the cold air, his entire soul would be frozen and shattered. At this moment, the everlasting ice lotus seemed to have taken root. It covered the ice-blue heart formed by the origin of ice. He could even see the roots of the everlasting ice lotus entering the blue heart. Zhuowen knew that it would take some time for the everlasting ice lotus to completely absorb the origin of ice. He simply sat cross-legged on the ground and began to cultivate. The energy here was much denser than the outside world. Since he had nothing to do, Zhuowen naturally would not waste this rare opportunity to cultivate. After half a month, the origin of ice on the altar was finally completely absorbed by the everlasting ice lotus. At this moment, the surface of the everlasting ice lotus was completely covered in ice blue. It looked very beautiful. Zhuowen waved his sleeve. The everlasting ice lotus flew out of the altar and landed in his palm. Although this everlasting ice lotus looked like a flower vase, Zhuowen knew that this ice lotus contained a terrifying amount of cold qi. Kacha. The moment Zhuowen put away the ice lotus, the surrounding ice walls began to shatter and finally collapsed inch by inch. Pieces of ice fell from the top. If one were to look at it from the outside, the ice tower that pierced through the clouds would begin to collapse, and the height of the ice tower would continue to decrease as time passed. Zhuan, who was standing inside the ice tower, saw with his own eyes the corpses sealed in the ice walls shatter into pieces of ice and dissipate in the wind. Even the Devourer King and the five-clawed golden dragon, who were confronting each other on the dome, were reduced to dust. As for the fatty sealed in ice between Devourer King and the five-clawed golden dragon, his eyes spun. As if he had lost the suppression of the ice origin, a golden flame gushed out from his body. Bang! The golden flame was extremely terrifying. The surrounding ice melted instantly, and the fatty stomped his right foot, intending to slip away. The moment the fatty touched the array that Zhuan had set up, he didn't panic. With a wave of his huge palm, the array was pierced through like a thin piece of paper. The fatty nimbly got out of the array. Zhuan's pupils shrank. This fatty's array Dao level was too high. The array he had set up with great effort couldn't even stop him for a breath of time. Where do you think you're going? Zhuan's eyes darkened. He knew that the fatty wasn't reliable, so he set up the array in advance. However, he didn't expect that the array he set up couldn't even stop the fatty for a breath of time. It was his mistake. Brother Zhua, lend me the space-time key for now. After Master Fatty is done with it, I will definitely return it to you. Ma Yujie's mocking voice came from midair. Zhuan rushed out of the collapsed ice tower and found that Ma Yujie was only a black dot left. His speed was extremely fast. Even if Zhuan went at full speed, he wouldn't be able to catch up with him. This guy hasn't escaped from this world of ice and snow. I wonder if I can use the everlasting ice lotus to restrict his speed. Zhuan thought of the everlasting ice lotus that had absorbed the ice origin. He quickly took it out and threw it out with his right hand. Immediately, the ice lotus shot up into the sky and began to spin. Suddenly, the world of ice and snow became colder and colder. It was as if the entire space was frozen. The fatty, who was thousands of miles away, held the space-time key in his hand. His eyes were filled with ecstasy. I originally thought that I, Lord Fatty, would be completely frozen in the ice tower. Who would have thought that a sucker would actually come and rescue me? This Zhuan is definitely my lucky star. Ma Yujie was overjoyed. Of course, besides the ecstasy, he also felt a little regretful that the ice origin had been seized by Zhuan. If he could get the ice origin as well, it would be perfect. Just as Ma Yujie was shaking his head and sighing about the ice origin, he suddenly felt the surrounding cold become more intense. Then, the power of condensation in the entire space became even more terrifying. His originally terrifying speed also dropped because of the sudden increase in the power of condensation. Damn, that guy thought of using the ice origin to control this world of ice and snow so quickly. Ma Yujie's face suddenly turned a little ugly. The reason why he was so anxious to leave this place was mainly because the ice origin was in the hands of Zhuan. This also meant that Zhuan had absolute control over this world. As long as he rushed out of this world of ice and snow before Zhuan could react, then with his level of array Dao and strength, he could escape far away with the space-time key. Although Ma Yujie thought of killing Zhuan and seizing the ice origin, his rationality made him immediately extinguish this idea. His intuition told him that Zhuan was definitely not simple and was very dangerous. If he dared to kill him, he would definitely be in trouble. Moreover, the ice origin was still in the hands of this guy. It was absolutely unwise to go against Zhuan in this world of ice and snow. Just as thousands of thoughts were running through Ma Yujie's mind, the sound of something breaking through the air sounded behind him. He didn't need to think to know that Zhuan had caught up. Ma Yujie turned around and said with a smile, "Oh, Brother Zhua is really not an ordinary person. You actually caught up so quickly. Just now, this Ma was just testing whether Brother Zhua had really mastered the ice origin. Now it seems that I worried too much." Zhuan stopped and sneered. "So according to what you said, your action of running away just now was for my sake?" Ma Yujie didn't seem to hear the sarcasm in Zhuan's words and said with a cheeky smile, "Of course, I did all this for you, brother. Otherwise, look at my fat body, it wouldn't have been easy." Chapter 2235. Tricked. Oh, I see. Thank you, Brother Ma. According to your promise, you should hand over the space-time key, right? Zhuan didn't want to continue flirting with Ma Yujie, so he shrugged. Ma Yujia was still smiling as he said, Brother Zhua, how about this? I'll keep the space-time key with me for safekeeping. It's useless to keep it with you anyway. When you need it, I'll return it to you. Zhuan narrowed his eyes and said impatiently, Hand it over. Otherwise, don't blame me for being rude. Ma Yujia's expression suddenly became serious. He said seriously, Since Brother Zhua doesn't want me to keep it, I won't force you. This is the space-time key. Take it. I've said before that a promise cannot be taken back. I'll do what I say. Yun took the space-time key doubtfully. He scanned it repeatedly with his powerful divine sense, but he didn't find anything suspicious about the space-time key. Moreover, he did feel the power of space-time on the space-time key. This power of space-time was definitely not fake. Brother Zhua, don't worry. This space-time key is not easy to fake. I think you should be able to feel the power of space-time, right? Apart from the space-time key, what else can have the power of space-time? Ma Yujie said with a serious face. Zhuan looked at Ma Yujie from head to toe. When he found that the latter was so serious, he wondered if this guy was acting. However, this fatty was right. The power of space-time couldn't be faked. Although it was his first time coming into contact with the space-time key, it wasn't his first time coming into contact with the power of space-time. Therefore, he could easily sense the powerful power of space-time in this white space-time key. After checking it a few more times and confirming that there was nothing wrong with the space-time key, he put it into his spirit ring and cupped his fists at the fatty in front of him. Zhuan couldn't see through the fatty's aura. It was obvious that this fatty had a very powerful concealment secret technique. Zhuan estimated that this fatty's cultivation should be around the 7th or 8th level of the Void Sky stage. He wasn't afraid of him, but he was mainly afraid of this fatty's level 9 array Dao. Zhuan had never seen a grade 9 array Dao Divine Master before. At least, he had never seen one in the Great Brahma domain. He guessed that even the Great Brahma Palace probably didn't have a grade 9 array Dao Divine Master. Brother Ma is right. You and I hit it off at first sight. I see that Brother Ma's array Dao level is impressive. You should have reached the 9th level of array Dao, right? Zhuowen said with a grin. Ma Yujie's eyes shone with pride as he said, I am indeed a level 9 divine array master. Of course, these are just small tricks. Brother Zhuo shouldn't be interested in them. The corner of Zhuowen's mouth twitched. He had originally planned to exchange knowledge about array formations with this fatty and ask him to impart some experience while he was at it. However, this guy had directly blocked the words he was about to say with a single sentence. Obviously, this fatty had guessed Zhuowen's intention, so he stopped the topic. Brother Zhua, I see that you are fine. Let's part here. Ma Yujie looked at Zhuowen and said with a smile. This world of ice and snow was still imprisoned by Zhuowen's everlasting ice lotus. Ma Yujie knew that without Zhuowen's permission, it would be difficult for him to leave this world of ice and snow. How about this? As long as Brother Ma answers a few of my questions, I will send Brother Ma out. How about it? Zhuowen said thoughtfully. Ma Yujie frowned and said helplessly, Ask away. My question is very simple. What is going on with so many corpses in the ice pagoda? Also, why are there the corpses of the 5-clawed golden dragon and the devouring king in the ice pagoda? And why did you appear between the two corpses? Zhuan stared at Ma Yujie and asked word by word. Ma Yujie's frown deepened. His eyes rolled a few times before he sighed. Actually, I don't know why there are so many corpses in the ice pagoda. When I entered to look for the space-time key, those corpses were already there, including the corpses of the devouring king and the 5-clawed golden dragon. At that time, the space-time key was suspended between the corpses of the devouring king and the 5-clawed golden dragon. At that time, there was a very small gap between the two corpses. At that time, I was possessed and entered the gap. When I obtained the space-time key, the cold energy in the ice pagoda suddenly became terrifying. Unfortunately, I was frozen inside. Zhuowen took a deep look at Ma Yujie and continued, The cold chi of the ice source is extremely terrifying, right? How did you survive in the ice? Brother Zhua, this is my secret. Forgive me for not being able to tell you, Ma Yujie said solemnly. Zhuan recalled the golden flames that burst out of the fatty's body when he broke out of the ice. He knew that the fatty's ability to survive until now should be inseparable from the golden flames in his body. Zhuan was sure that the golden flames were not simple. When the golden flames appeared, Yuan actually felt the power of laws from them. Brother Zhua, now that I've asked the questions, you should let me out now, right? If you want to break the contract, this Ma might have a way to forcefully leave this place. Ma Yujia looked at Zhuan in a provocative manner. Zhuan raised his eyebrows. With a wave of his sleeve, he put away the everlasting ice lotus floating in the air. Suddenly, the surrounding cold energy dropped sharply and returned to its original state. Brother Zhua, many thanks. This Ma still has some matters to attend to, so I'll take my leave first. Ma Yujia's eyes lit up when he saw that the surrounding cold energy had returned to its original state. He cupped his hands at Zhuan and quickly left the place. Looking at Ma Yujia leaving in a hurry, Zhuan frowned slightly. Why was this damn fatty in such a hurry to leave? It was as if he had a guilty conscience. Zhuan didn't think too much about it. This time, his harvest was extremely bountiful. Not only did he obtain the ice origin and increase the power of the everlasting ice lotus, but he also obtained the white spacetime key. He knew that there were a total of 3 spacetime keys. Now that he had unexpectedly obtained one, he also had clues about the other one. As long as he could find the 3rd spacetime key, he would be able to open the spacetime temple. Although he knew very little about the spacetime temple from how precious the spacetime key was to the Devourer King, as well as the shocking scene in the ice tower, he knew that the spacetime temple was definitely not simple. Zhuan took out the white spacetime key again and planned to study it carefully. After all, he planned to look for the 2nd spacetime key on the map given to him by the Devourer King. Naturally, he had to memorize the appearance of the spacetime key. However, the moment he took out the spacetime key, he was stunned. His eyes became dull. Countless cracks appeared on the surface of the spacetime key in his hand. In the end, it exploded with a bang. Countless white powder drifted in the air. Chapter 2236. Seeing Tong Chimei again, Zhuowen's gaze flickered as he rushed out of the pocket dimension's exit. Tang Wuing and the other 2 were guarding the entrance. When they saw Zhuowen come out, all of them had reserved expressions and bowed respectfully. Did you see a fatty come out just now? Zhuowen asked with a gloomy gaze. Tang Wuing's heart trembled when he saw Zhuowen's unfriendly tone. He hurriedly said, Sir, there was indeed a fatty who came out just now. He called himself Lord Fatty and said he was your best brother. Moreover, he was very powerful, so Zhuowen didn't say anything. Instead, he released his enormous divine sense and radiated it towards the surrounding starry sky. The moment Tang Wuing, Tang Wuzong, and Tang Wuxi felt this surge of divine sense, their bodies trembled and their faces turned deathly pale. They secretly complained in their hearts. They didn't expect Zhuowen's divine sense to be so terrifying. If their divine sense was a small stream, then Zhuowen's divine sense was a vast ocean. The 2 weren't on the same level at all. After about an hour, Yuan withdrew his divine sense and sighed in his heart. He knew that with the fatty's speed, he had probably left the danger zone. However, he was still unwilling to give up. Hand over the complete map and you can scram. Zhuowen spread his hands at Tang Wuing and the other 2 and said coldly. Tang Wuing hurriedly nodded. After handing over a jade slip, he hurriedly left with Tang Wuzong and Tang Wuxi. Zhuowen's divine sense scanned the contents of the jade slip. Shortly after, he stomped his right foot and left the place. At the exit of the danger zone, Zhuowen slowly stepped out. He looked at the normal starry sky in front of him. He knew that he had finally left the danger zone behind. Although he had obtained the ice source energy and plundered a lot of resources from the pocket dimension, in his opinion, these couldn't be compared to a space-time key. Damn fatty, don't let me see him in the future. If I do, I'll definitely not let him go. Yuan was very unhappy when he thought about how that damn fatty had used a fake key to deceive him. This was the first time he had suffered such a big loss. However, the fat man's methods were indeed impressive. He was actually able to tamper with the fake key and create space-time energy. This was truly beyond Zhuowen's expectations. Although the white spacetime divine key had been snatched away by the fatso, Nguyen still had clues about the other spacetime divine key. If he could obtain this spacetime divine key, he would be able to enter the spacetime wilderness. At that time, his chances of encountering that damned fatty would be much higher. After all, 3 spacetime keys were required to open the temporal temple. That damned fatty had only 1 spacetime key, so he couldn't enter the temporal temple at all. Thinking of this, Juan was eager to find the second spacetime key marked on the map. Of course, he still did not know the exact location of the map's endpoint. He had to make a trip to the half-moon hall first. The half-moon hall was formed by several galaxies. From afar, it looked like a half-moon, which was quite fitting for the name half-moon hall. The half-moon-shaped galaxies revolved around the half-moon hall in the center. Without a doubt, the half-moon hall was the core and ruler of this galaxy. After Juon entered the galaxy, he did not encounter any checks. However, when he arrived at the mainland where the half-moon hall was located, he was stopped outside. The guard at the entrance looked at Juon with hostility and said coldly, "Who are you? What business do you have in the half-moon hall?" Juon was helpless. Just as he was about to take out the token that Han Yen had given him, a surprised voice suddenly came from behind him. "Brother Zhua? Is it really you?" Juon turned his head and saw a beautiful lady dressed in a moon-white robe looking at him in surprise. Juon smiled and said, "Ching, long time no see." The lady who had called out Juon's name was the half-moon hall's genius, Tong Chime. At this moment, Tong Chime was accompanied by a handsome young man with a fair complexion. When the handsome young man saw Tong Chime affectionately calling out to this unfamiliar man as Brother Zhua, he subconsciously frowned. Tong Chime immediately abandoned the handsome young man beside her and came in front of Zhua Wen. She sized Zhua Wen up from head to toe and said with a charming smile, "I knew Big Brother Zhua would be fine. Did you come to the half-moon hall to look for someone?" When she said this, Tong Chime's beautiful eyes curved into crescents. Anyone could see the joy in her eyes. Zhua Wen nodded. Just as he was about to say that he was here to look for Elder Han Yen, Tong Chime hurriedly grabbed Zhua Wen's arm and said with a smile, "Big Brother Zhua, it's rare for you to come to half-moon hall. Come in and have a seat. Let Chime entertain you properly." After she said this, Tong Chime pulled Zhuowen into the half-moon hall without any explanation. When the guards at the entrance saw that it was Tong Chime who had brought someone in, they naturally did not dare to say anything and quickly let them in. However, the handsome young man who had been forgotten by Tong Chime had a gloomy look in his eyes. Especially when he saw Tong Chime pulling Zhuowen's arm so passionately, the flames of anger in his heart surged. Previously, he had spoken kindly to Tong Chime and had even given her many resources as gifts. However, Tong Chime had never smiled at him. However, now that an unfamiliar man had suddenly appeared and Tong Chime's attitude was so warm, the flames of jealousy in the handsome young man's heart burned fiercely. Where did this little bastard come from? He actually made Chime so warm. Could it be that Chime likes this little bastard? The handsome young man silently watched as Zhuan and Tong Chime walked into the distance. He did not chase after them but stood on the spot thinking about something. After thinking for a long time, the handsome young man realized that this Zhuan did not match any of the young talents he could think of. He knew that this stranger was definitely a nobody. If it was an extremely famous genius who was pursuing Tong Chime, he would feel slightly better. However, this unfamiliar young man in front of him was a nobody. The handsome young man was extremely angry and displeased. However, very quickly, the handsome young man's lips curled into a cold arc and he entered the half-moon hall. The Lake Moon Inn was Tong Chime's dwelling within the half-moon hall. At this moment, within Tong Chime's room, Zhuan and Tong Chime sat facing each other. Tong Chime personally poured 2 cups of tea and sat across from Zhuan. She asked rather excitedly, "Brother Zhuan, do you know that you're now a famous person in the star field? Also, the shocking things you've done, even I find it unbelievable. Did you really destroy those sects? Also, didn't the rumors say that you, Qin Changxing, and Fu Yuz all fell into a fault in space? No one has ever been able to come out of that fault in space. How did you come out? Or did you not fall into the fault in space at all? But that can't be right. You've been missing for more than 10 years and you didn't fall into the fault in space. Then where did you go? Chapter 2237. Framing Tong Chimay also realized that she had asked too many questions. She awkwardly stroked the bun on her temples, but there was a different kind of charm to her. It had to be said that Tong Chimay was indeed a rare beauty. She was not inferior to Mu Chenxue at all. Moreover, although she appeared cold on the surface, Juan realized that Tong Chimay was quite easy to get along with after getting to know her better. Big brother Zhua, am I asking too many questions? Tong Chimay asked weakly. Juan smiled and said, Chimay, I know you have a lot of questions. Let me tell you one by one. Although Zhuowen and Tong Chimay had not interacted for long, Tong Chimay had helped him a lot in the past. Therefore, Juan had a good impression of this woman who was cold on the outside but warm on the inside. Next, Zhuowen briefly recounted his experience. Of course, he skipped over some things that were related to his own secrets and didn't go into too much detail. After Zhuowen finished, Tong Chimay rested her chin on her hands and looked at Zhuowen in a daze. There was a rare look of adoration in her eyes. Zhuowen could not resist Tong Chimay's gaze and hurriedly said, Chimay, I came to the half-moon hall this time for an important matter. Big brother Zhua, tell me what is it? If I can help you, I will definitely help you. Tong Chimay regained her senses and said generously. Zhuowen pondered for a moment and said in a deep voice, It's like this. I heard that Yuezu of the Half-Moon Hall has the star map of the 8 heavens on him? Tong Chimay was taken aback. She immediately nodded and said, Grandmaster does indeed have the star map of the 8 heavens. However, the star map is a little incomplete. Moreover, this star map is extremely important to Grandmaster. Big brother Zhua, do you intend to borrow that star map? Tong Chimay's beautiful eyes turned slightly. She was originally very intelligent. Now that Zhuowen asked this question, she immediately guessed Zhuowen's purpose. Zhuowen didn't hide it and said, Yes, I have a map on me, but I don't know which heaven this map belongs to, so I have to compare it with the star charts of the 8 heavens. Tong Chimay's beautiful eyes flickered as she said, Big brother Zhua, I'll help you think of a way. Zhuowen looked at Tong Chimay suspiciously. Chimay, didn't you say that the star chart was extremely important to the Yuezu? I think it will be very difficult for you to borrow it. Don't worry, I still have a way. Before Zhuowen could finish speaking, he was interrupted by Tong Chimay. Tong Chimay said in a rare serious tone, Big brother Zhua, you helped me so much in the past, but Chimay didn't help much. Chimay has always felt guilty about it. This time, Big brother Zhua, you have a favor to ask of me. If I can't help you, Chimay won't have the face to see you again. Big brother Zhua, don't worry, Grandmaster is very good to me. When the time comes, I'll find a way to borrow the star chart from Grandmaster. Zhuowen looked at the serious expression on Tong Chimay's face and shook his head helplessly. Chimay, you're exaggerating. You did your best back then and helped me a lot. You don't owe me anything. Tong Chimay shook her head and said seriously, Big brother Zhua, let me try first. If I can borrow it, you won't have to trouble others. Hearing this, Zhuowen could only nod. He knew that this was Tong Chimay's good intentions, and he didn't want to disappoint her. Seeing that Zhuowen agreed, Tong Chimay was very happy. Just as she was about to say something, her beautiful eyes narrowed and she took out her communication jade charm. Tong Chimay's communication jade charm was flashing. Clearly, someone was sending her a message. Tong Chimay glanced at it and said apologetically to Zhuowen, Big brother Zhua, my master sent me a message. It seems that I have to make a trip. Don't worry, I might be able to find a way to borrow the star chart of the 8 heavens for you. Zhuowen smiled faintly and said, You go first. Tong Chimay nodded and left a few more instructions before leaving the cave dwelling. In the spacious cave dwelling, Nguyen sat quietly by the table. He silently looked at the jade token in his hand. This jade token was given to him by Tong Chimay, and it was the key to Tong Chimay's cave dwelling. With this jade token, Nguyen could freely enter and exit Tong Chimay's cave dwelling. Zhuowen shook his head, thinking that Tong Chimay trusted him too much. She even personally gave him the key to the cave dwelling. Keeping the jade token, Nguyen thought for a while and decided to leave the cave dwelling. Although Tong Chimei said that she would definitely help him borrow the star chart of the 8 heavens, he knew that although Tong Chimei was a genius of the half-moon hall, her qualifications were not enough to borrow the star chart from the Yuezu. For this matter, he had to find Han Yen. After all, Han Yen was the supreme elder of the half-moon hall and held a high position. Even the Yuezu would give Han Yen face. Thinking of this, Wen left Tong Chimei's cave dwelling. Outside Tong Chimei's cave dwelling, there was a large and elegant garden. Zhuan was unfamiliar with the half-moon hall and naturally would not wander around. He took out the identity token that Han Yen had given him and sent a message on it. Then he strolled around the garden. Han Yan's identity token naturally had a communication function. As long as he arrived at the half-moon hall and sent a message to Han Yen would know immediately. Zhuan believed that Han Yen would arrive here soon. When Zhuan walked into a peach blossom forest, he suddenly heard a soft moan coming from the peach blossom forest in front of him. Zhuan used his divine sense to scan the area and immediately saw a scene of naked bodies. In his divine sense, he saw a pair of young men doing despicable things. From their clothes, he could tell that they were disciples of the half-moon hall. However, the half-moon hall was after all the leader of the 10 great sections. Why would there be disciples doing such things in the garden? This made Zhuan speechless. Zhuan did not continue to use his divine sense to investigate. Although there was an array in the garden that blocked out divine sense, Zhuan's divine sense was extremely powerful and naturally would not be suppressed. After retracting his divine sense, Zhuan took a detour and went in the opposite direction of the couple. However, Zhuan soon realized that something was wrong. He realized that there were dense footsteps coming from the peach blossom forest. Zhuan had not taken many steps when more than 20 figures appeared around him and surrounded him. What is the meaning of this? Zhuan looked at the clothes of the 20 people and realized that they were all disciples of the half-moon hall. What is the meaning of this? You insulted our junior sister. What do you think we are doing? The leader was a dignified man in white. At this moment, he was holding a long sword and looking coldly at Zhuan as he hooted. Zhuan looked at the man in white and sneered in his heart. Wasn't this man the man of the pair of man and woman that he had sensed with his divine sense earlier? Now, this man actually had the face to stand out and accuse him of insulting his junior sister? This man's skin was a little too thick. Although Zhuan didn't know what was going on, he naturally guessed that someone was trying to frame him. Although this method was very low-end, it was impossible to use divine sense in this place. Using this kind of framing method, and then immediately killing the person who was framing him, there would be no evidence. Chapter 2238. Senior Brother Ji, you have no evidence. Why do you say that I humiliated your junior sister? Zhuan sneered. The white-clothed man was not in a hurry. He looked behind him and a woman in messy clothes slowly walked out. Zhuan was not unfamiliar with this woman. It was the woman who had intercourse with the white-clothed man in the depths of the peach forest. At this moment, the woman looked at the white-clothed man timidly. Her legs were weak. The white-clothed man waved at the woman and said, "Junior Sister Yun, come here." The woman's beautiful eyes revealed a trace of panic, but she still obediently came to the white-clothed man's side. "Junior Apprentice Sister Yuan, is this guy the one who insulted you?" As the white-clothed man spoke, he pointed at Zhuan and said meaningfully. The woman glanced at Zhuan, then turned her head away and did not say anything. The white-clothed man narrowed his eyes. His right hand grabbed the woman's jade-like arm and he raised his voice. "Junior Sister Yuan, don't be afraid. We are all here. As long as you give up the person who humiliated you, everything will be fine." The woman's expression changed slightly. Her delicate body trembled. She pointed at Zhuan and did not say anything. Seeing the woman's action, the surrounding 20 or so disciples were all furious. They stared at Zhuan with fire in their eyes. "Beast, an outsider actually dares to be so presumptuous in our half-moon hall. How dare he insult junior Sister Yuan? This person deserves to die. If we don't kill such a reckless person, it will be hard to convince the masses." Immediately, the condemnation was like a wave, one wave higher than the other. The white-clothed man let go of the woman, then stared coldly at Juan and said, "Outsider, although I don't know how you entered the half-moon hall, but you have done such an outrageous thing, which is already disgraceful. Now, I will give you a chance. If you surrender immediately, I might be lenient with you." Juan could not be bothered to talk nonsense with these 20-odd disciples. The strongest among them was the white-clothed man, whose cultivation was only at the 4th step of the illusory sky realm. In front of him, they were like ants. Although he didn't know why the man in white wanted to frame him, he really didn't want to care about it. Boom. At this moment, Nguyen did not hold back his aura at all. In just an instant, the peach trees in the peach forest shook violently. Peach blossoms fell like rain in all directions, forming a gorgeous storm. Pluck, pluck. Under such a terrifying aura, all the disciples surrounding Juan, except for the white-robed man, knelt on the ground. Even the white-robed man was barely able to support his body. He was trembling and seemed to be having a hard time. At this moment, the white-robed man was shocked. He didn't expect this outsider's strength to be so terrifying. Just the aura released by this outsider had probably reached the 5th level of the Void Sky realm. Senior Brother G clearly said that this person was just a nobody, so his strength shouldn't be very strong. How could? The white-robed man's heart grew more and more fearful. Jun slowly walked in front of the white-robed man and lifted his chin with his right hand. He coldly said, "Who ordered you to do this?" Jun was very clear that this white-robed man was so weak. Moreover, he had never even seen this white-robed man before. Someone must have ordered him to do this. The white-robed man's body trembled. He bit his lips tightly and did not intend to reveal the mastermind behind this. The white-robed man was very clear that this person was definitely nothing compared to young Master G. If he revealed young Master G, he would definitely die. After all, this person was an outsider. He did not believe that this person would dare to start a massacre here. After all, the half-moon hall's strength was well known in the entire star field. Not going to speak? Nguyen was a little surprised by this white-robed man's stubbornness. However, the surprise in his eyes soon turned into a terrifying killing intent. He also lifted the white-robed man up. "Do you think that I don't dare to kill in the half-moon hall? Is that why you're so fearless?" Zhuowen said indifferently. The white-robed man hurriedly said, "I am a disciple of the half-moon hall. You can't kill me. Once you kill me, you will completely offend the half-moon hall. I think you know the consequences better than I do." The sneer on Zhuowen's face grew wider. Back then, he dared to destroy the Dark Mirage sect, High Heaven sect, and the other 10 great sects alone. Although the half-moon hall was powerful, Zhuowen's strength was also much stronger than before. Although he might not have the ability to fight against the entire half-moon hall alone, it was almost impossible for the half-moon hall to keep him here. Speaking of which, he was not afraid of the half-moon hall at all. "Stop!" A cold voice suddenly rang out. Zhuan stomped his right foot and flung the white-robed man backwards. Bang! A strong collision sound rang out, followed by a blood-curdling scream from the white-robed man. He fell to the ground and was on the verge of death. Zhuan turned around and looked behind him, only to see 2 streaks of light flying over from the sky. Just now, one of the streaks of light had launched a terrifying attack. Zhuan had sensed it, so he did not hesitate to throw the white-robed man out as a shield. So, 2 streaks of light landed near the white-robed man. Zhuan was not unfamiliar with one of the 2 people. It was actually the handsome young man who had entered the Half-Moon Palace together with Tong Chimei when Zhuan entered the Half-Moon Palace. The other person was a black-robed old man who was as thin as a skeleton. Moreover, the aura of this black-robed old man was not weak. He was actually a 6th step Void Sky Master. "Junior Brother Chin, what's going on?" The handsome young man came to the white-robed man's side and immediately took out a crystal-clear divine pill from his spirit ring and fed it to the white-robed man. Zhuan could clearly see that it was a level 5 healing divine pill, the 5 Qi restoring divine pill. It had a very powerful healing effect. It had to be said that this handsome young man was really rich. He could take out a level 5 divine pill just like that. It seemed like this handsome young man's position in the Half-Moon Hall was not low. "Senior Brother G, you're finally here." This outsider is too much. Not only did he humiliate junior sister Yuan, when we wanted to capture him to confess his crimes, he relied on his powerful cultivation and actually injured us. If senior brother Ji did not come in time, he would have killed me. He's really too hateful. After the white-robed man recovered some of his strength, he immediately started to complain tearfully. He exaggerated Zhuowen's crimes to the extreme, as if Zhuowen's crimes were too numerous to be recorded. His crimes were extremely heinous. A mere sixth-step Void Sky brat actually dares to behave so atrociously in the Half Moon Hall. Who let you enter the Half Moon Hall? What's your purpose? Senior brother Ji put down the white-robed man and looked at Zhuowen with resentment. He then said to the skinny old man beside him, Elder Fu, not only did this person humiliate our Half Moon Hall's junior sister, he also maliciously injured a disciple. Now, he's even more overbearing. If we don't kill this kind of person, how can we convince the others? Zhuowen watched all of this in silence, especially that senior brother Ji's face. He had already guessed that the person who wanted to deal with him should be this senior brother Ji. Chapter 2239. Eruption. Nephew Ji is right. You are too arrogant. You should know that this is the Half Moon Hall. Your Void Sky 6 steps cultivation is nothing here. You should obediently be captured and await your punishment. The skinny old man placed his hands behind his back and looked at Zhuowen indifferently. Obviously, in his opinion, although this young man's cultivation was not bad, it was insignificant in the Half Moon Hall where experts were as common as clouds. After the skinny old man finished speaking, 3 streaks of light flew over from afar and finally arrived at the peach forest. These 3 people were also old men who were over 70 years old. The one leading them was a red-faced old man. The red-faced old man looked at the skinny old man and frowned. What's going on? What happened here? These 3 old men's strength was not ordinary. They were all Void Sky 6 steps and should be elders of the Half Moon Hall. The skinny old man briefly explained the situation, and the red-faced old man's and the other 2's gazes immediately became unfriendly. This is simply a heinous crime and an affront to public decency. The red-faced old man glared and waved his right hand. His divine energy condensed into a giant hand and directly grabbed at Jun. Senior brother Ji stood at the back and sneered at this scene. Although he was surprised that Zhuowen's cultivation was so high, he knew that Zhuowen was finished. Not to mention that there were 4 Void Sky 6 steps elders here. Just the crime of framing Zhuowen was enough to make this guy a rat that everyone in the Half Moon Hall wanted to beat up. Trying to snatch my woman, you are simply courting death. Senior brother Ji sneered in his heart. The red-faced old man's divine energy giant hand was extremely fast and arrived in front of Zhuowen in an instant. Zhuowen stood still. His right hand formed into a claw and fiercely clenched. Instantly, the red-faced old man's divine energy giant hand was stopped in its tracks. Then, Zhuowen exerted force and the red-faced old man's expression changed slightly. He felt his body become lighter and he involuntarily fell towards Zhuowen. Then, under everyone's gaze, he fell flat on his face. The scene suddenly became much quieter. The other 3 elders' faces stiffened, and senior brother Ji's body trembled. As for the 20 or so disciples, they were all stunned on the spot as they stared blankly at the red-faced old man who had fallen flat on his face. Although they knew that this unfamiliar young man's strength was also at the 6th step of the Void Sky realm, the red-faced old man was also at the 6th step of the Void Sky realm. Moreover, he was the strongest of the 4, having reached the peak of the 6th step of the Void Sky realm. Originally, they thought that the unfamiliar young man would definitely be at a disadvantage when the red-faced old man attacked. However, they did not expect that the young man would make the powerful red-faced old man fall flat on his face with just a grab. This was beyond everyone's expectations. The red-faced old man's face turned even redder. He hurriedly stood up and retreated to the side of the 3 elders. He looked at Zhuowen in horror. Just now, this young man had only stretched out his hand and clasped it, and he had fallen to the ground without any resistance. This was really unbelievable to him, and he didn't even dare to imagine what kind of powerful strength was needed to do this. Elder Miao, what's wrong with you? Just now, The skinny old man immediately asked when he saw the red-faced old man retreat to his side. Although he knew that this might have been caused by the unfamiliar young man, he subconsciously felt that it was impossible for the unfamiliar young man to do it, so he asked this question. The three of you, this child is not simple. It's best to be careful. The red-faced old man said solemnly. At this moment, Juan spoke again. Everyone, the matter of the insult is completely false. I hope that the four of you can be impartial and not slander a good person. A thief calling a thief? These people are all witnesses, and now you're saying that we're slandering you? Do you think we're fools? Senior brother G, who was standing behind the four elders, sneered and mocked. Juan's eyes were cold and sharp. He stomped his right foot, and his right hand moved like lightning. Surging divine power transformed into a huge hand that suddenly grabbed at senior brother G. He was sure that this senior martial brother G was the one who came up with the scheme to frame him. You dare? The skinny old man roared angrily. He also condensed a huge hand of divine power and blasted it out. At the same time, he transmitted his voice to the red-faced old man and his two companions and attacked together. He naturally saw the red-faced old man's miserable state just now. He knew that facing this young man alone was simply asking for a beating, so naturally, he had to ask for help. The red-faced old man and his two companions naturally wouldn't refuse. Although the red-faced old man didn't gain any advantage from Juan, it didn't mean that the four of them weren't a match for Juan even if they joined forces. For huge hands of divine power blasted out at the same time, like four angry dragons whistling out. The entire peach blossom forest was set off a terrifying peach blossom storm. The surrounding disciples, including senior brother G, all retreated to a certain distance and watched everything with solemn eyes. Senior brother G, isn't this person too strong? Didn't you say that this person was a nobody? The white-robed man standing beside senior brother G said with some dissatisfaction. Senior brother G sneered and said, You dare to question me? If I didn't protect you, do you think you could cover up your scandal? The white-robed man's expression changed slightly and he hurriedly said, Junior brother doesn't dare. Senior brother G nodded and immediately looked at the battlefield and said, This person is indeed not simple. However, with four elders joining forces, how long can he jump around? Moreover, my grandfather will be here soon. Where can this person escape to? Hearing senior brother G mention his grandfather, the white-robed man's neck shrank. Senior brother G's grandfather was the law-enforcing elder of Half Moon Hall. He was very powerful and had a cultivation of Void Sky Stage 7. He was in charge of the laws of Half Moon Hall. If anyone in Half Moon Hall broke the law-enforcing elder was the most cold-blooded and merciless person and would not tolerate it. This unfamiliar young man had the crime of humiliating a female disciple. The law-enforcing elder would not let him go. It was even possible that he would be executed on the spot as a warning to others. Bang! At this moment, the four huge hands of the skinny old man and his companions blasted onto Juan's huge hands of divine power. The terrifying aftershock of the collision caused a large area of space to distort. Fortunately, this garden was set up with a powerful array. Therefore, although the collision of the five people was very powerful, most of the impact was neutralized by the array. Juan silently looked at the four elders who blocked his huge hands of divine power. His expression did not change as he said indifferently, I have no intention of becoming enemies with you. However, since you won a yard after taking an inch, don't blame me for being impolite. As he said this, Juan clenched his right hand and the huge hands of divine power clenched into a fist and smashed down. Instantly, the four huge hands of divine power were smashed into pieces by this fist. Juan knew that he was currently in the territory of Half Moon Hall. Here, even if he was framed by senior brother G, the people of Half Moon Hall would definitely not believe an outsider like him and suspect a disciple of Half Moon Hall. Even if this matter was really done by the Half Moon Hall, the four elders would still think of ways to push the blame onto Juan and make him a scapegoat to cover up the scandal of Half Moon Hall. Therefore, no matter what, he would definitely not be able to escape from being framed. Therefore, Juan could not bear it and directly crushed them with thunderous means. Bang bang bang. Chapter 2240. Your blood, Grandpa. The moment the four elders were sent flying, Zhuowen's giant hand made a beeline for Senior Brother Ji like a hot knife through butter. Senior Brother Ji's expression changed greatly. With a low roar, he took out the jade pendant from his waist and dripped a drop of fresh blood on it. Instantly, a blazing and terrifying light burst out in all directions, forming a powerful protective barrier in front of Senior Brother Ji. Bang! The divine palm instantly blasted over. Senior Brother Ji was sent flying in an extremely sorry state and landed several hundred meters away. However, Hun looked at the jade pendant in front of Senior Brother Ji in astonishment. The energy barrier released by the jade pendant was indeed terrifying. Although Zhuowen's divine palm wasn't at his full strength, its power was still incomparable. Moreover, Senior Brother Ji's cultivation was only at the fourth step of the Void Sky realm. Generally speaking, it was impossible for him to survive under Zhuowen's divine palm. However, the energy released by Senior Brother Ji's jade pendant was so terrifying that it blocked Zhuowen's divine palm. Little bastard, do you really think you're invincible? Not only did you insult our Half-Moon Hall's junior sister, you even want to kill us. You're simply despicable and shameless. Just you wait, my grandfather is the enforcement elder. He'll be here soon and you'll be dead for sure. Senior Brother Ji crawled up in a sorry state. There was a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. It seemed that although he had relied on the power of the jade pendant to block Zhuowen's divine hand, the recoil from it was still quite terrifying. Zhuowen was too lazy to pay attention to Senior Brother Ji. He stretched out his right hand again. This time, he poured out all of his divine palm. It was unknown how much more terrifying the divine palm was than before. Bang! Senior Brother Ji was sent flying again. He spat out a large mouthful of blood. His face was pale and there were cracks on the jade pendant in his hand. Senior Brother Ji's eyes were filled with fear. This jade pendant was a protective talisman given to him by his grandfather. Cultivators below the seventh step of the Void Sky realm would find it difficult to break through the jade pendant's defense. However, Hun almost broke it. Zhuowen's eyes were cold. He blasted out the divine palm again. He knew that Senior Brother Ji's jade pendant wouldn't be able to withstand his attack. However, just as Zhuowen's divine power giant hand was about to strike, a cold snort came from the sky. Then, a giant hand that was no weaker than Zhuowen's divine power giant hand came crashing down like a mountain. The two large hands collided, and countless storms shot out. Soon after, both of them collapsed into nothingness. Zhuowen's eyes narrowed as he raised his head to look at the sky. He saw an old man with white hair and a ruddy complexion slowly walking over and landing in front of Senior Brother Ji. Grandpa! Senior Brother Ji said excitedly. Elder of Law Enforcement. The four elders and the remaining 20 or so disciples who had been repelled by Zhuowen all bowed respectfully to the white-haired old man who had just arrived. The white-haired old man nodded his head slightly. Then he looked at the cracked jade pendant in Senior Brother Ji's hand. A cold glint flashed across his eyes as he asked coldly, "Who did this?" "It's this boy. This boy isn't a disciple of our Half-Moon Hall. However, he dared to humiliate Junior Sister Yuan in our Half-Moon Hall. Not only that, he even injured our senior and junior brothers. Relying on his high cultivation level, he acted recklessly and didn't put our Half-Moon Hall in his eyes at all," Senior Brother Ji quickly said. "Is what he said true?" The white-haired, ruddy-faced old man ignored Zhuowen and instead looked at the four elders as he asked. The skinny old man hurriedly said, "Disciplinary elder, Nephew Ji is right. This kid has indeed insulted the female disciples of our sect. This matter is known to all 20 of us here. The four of us originally planned to capture him, but unfortunately, this kid used despicable means to defeat us, so," Zhuowen sneered in his heart as he watched everything silently. He knew that these people were just putting on an act. Their goal was to pin a crime on him so that their sect master wouldn't reprimand him if he was captured. The old man with white hair and a ruddy complexion nodded slightly. Finally, his gaze landed on Zhuowen. An unprecedented killing intent suddenly erupted, firmly locking onto Zhuowen. "Do you know your crime? Now, you have a chance to kill yourself in front of me. I won't investigate you and I won't implicate your friends and family, the white-haired old man said arrogantly. Yuan narrowed his eyes. This elder of law enforcement's cultivation level was only around Void Sky 7 steps. In front of him, Yuan, he actually acted so high and mighty. Yuan really didn't know what this guy was thinking. Not interested, Yuan replied indifferently. The white-haired old man grinned. His eyes revealed a cruel expression as he said, "Then you're courting death." With that, the white-haired old man made his move. Unfortunately, Yuan was even faster than him. A giant hand made of divine power had already arrived in front of the white-haired old man. The white-haired old man was both shocked and furious. With a low roar, he also blasted out a giant hand made of divine power. When the two collided, the white-haired old man revealed a look of shock. He actually retreated dozens of steps in the collision. The moment he stabilized his body, a bloody light swept past his feet like a comet. Pucci. The white-haired old man was caught off guard. His calves were immediately cut off by the bloody light and he fell to the ground in a sorry state. Moreover, the white-haired old man discovered that the wound that was cut off by the bloody light was extremely corrosive. When he wanted to use his divine power to regenerate his legs, he discovered that the recovery was extremely slow, like a snail. The bloody light flashed and disappeared, falling around Jun. Only then did the crowd realize that the bloody light was actually a bloody sword. "My lord, what do you think of my move?" The Blood Immortal smirked slightly proudly and asked Juan for praise. Juan nodded and said, "Not bad." Although it was only a 2-word evaluation, the Blood Immortal was still overjoyed. He had been following Juan for a long time. It could be said that he didn't have much time to contribute. After all, Juan's strength had always been much stronger than his, so he didn't need to use him. However, since he followed Xiao He and became a weapon cultivator, his good days had come. Not only did his strength increase day by day, but it was also very fast. Now, his strength was comparable to the peak of Void Sky 7th step. It was a little difficult for him to kill the law-enforcing elder, but it was more than enough for a sneak attack. The white-haired old man fell from heaven to hell. Clearly, he hadn't reacted yet. He was stunned on the spot. Senior Brother Ji, the 4 elders, and the others who wanted the law-enforcing elder to stand up for them were also stunned. They didn't expect the law-enforcing elder's legs to be cut off so easily. At this moment, including Senior Brother Ji, there was finally a trace of fear for the young man in front of him. Senior Brother Ji was the first to react. He immediately flew into the distance. Unfortunately, the Blood Immortal sword was much faster than him. Boom! The Blood Immortal sword caught up with Senior Brother Ji. With only one slash, the Blood Immortal sword shattered Senior Brother Ji's protective shield. Then, with another slash, Senior Brother Ji's legs were cut off. He fell from the sky and fell to the ground with a bloody nose and a swollen face. Trash, Void Sky 4th step, keep running. If you keep running, I'll cut off your 3rd leg too. Chapter 2241. Hanyan, bring him here. Zhuowen said calmly. The Blood Immortal sword's body trembled. Then, it smiled at Zhuowen. With a flick of the sword, it lifted Senior Brother Ji up and brought him to Zhuowen. Zhuowen lifted Senior Apprentice Brother Ji with his right hand and poured out his powerful divine power. Senior Apprentice Brother Ji couldn't even struggle. He could only watch as Zhuowen lifted him up. At the same time, the man in white who had framed him earlier, seeing that the law enforcement elder and Senior Brother Ji had both been defeated, rolled his eyes and began to slowly retreat, intending to slip away. Unfortunately, the Blood Immortal sword was 1 step ahead and cut off the man's legs. Then it carried him over. Junior Sister Yuan, who had been humiliated, was in the crowd. Her beautiful eyes were filled with pleasure. Zhuan turned around and looked at Junior Sister Yuan. The latter's beautiful eyes were filled with fear. She could not help but take a few steps back. Junior Sister Yuan, don't be afraid. Come out. These people can't threaten you now. Now you can tell me the truth. Did I humiliate you? Zhuan looked at Junior Sister Yuan. Previously, when the white-robed man brought up this Junior Sister Yuan, he knew that this Junior Sister Yuan was most likely threatened and forced. Junior sister Yuan looked at the man in white and senior brother Ji. She lowered her head and did not speak. Zhuowen did not intend to play games with this junior apprentice sister Yuan. A terrifying divine sense suddenly invaded her soul. Junior sister Yuan raised her head. Her eyes were filled with confusion. She murmured, "It was senior brother Chen who drugged me and humiliated me." Then he led his fellow disciples to surround this strange young man. He threatened me to identify him as the one who had humiliated me. I could not resist. I could only listen to senior brother Chen. The four elders who had been filled with righteous indignation were shocked. They looked at the man in white in disbelief. Zhuan withdrew his divine thought. Junior sister Yuan also regained her consciousness. Zhuan looked at the man in white and said, "I see. You are the one who called me a thief. For elders, I have no intention to be enemies with the Half-Moon Hall. However, Yuan will not casually put on a scapegoat. I hope the four of you can see through this." As he spoke, Zhuowen looked at the four elders. The four of them knew how powerful he was and would definitely not act rashly. In addition, now that the truth had been revealed, he knew that the four of them had no reason to capture him. "Chen Rongyo, you've got guts. You actually dared to insult your junior sister from the same sect. Moreover, you even threatened to frame her. You've simply thrown away the face of our Half-Moon Hall." The skinny elder among the four elders was raged. He was Rongi's hand formed with divine power, and slammed it towards the man in white. There was no mercy. He didn't hold back at all in this attack, and it was enough to completely kill the white-robed man. Zhuowen sneered. With a wave of his sleeve, the skinny elder's divine power dissipated. "I say, elder, although this person wants to frame me, I don't know this person. This person has no motive to frame me at all. It can only be said that he was ordered by someone. Why are you in such a hurry to kill him?" Zhuan looked at the skinny elder. Then he looked down at the man in white and said, "Tell me who ordered you." The white-robed man's entire body was trembling. Just now, the skinny old man's attack had really intended to kill him. He could deeply feel the white-robed man's killing intent, and he also knew that this skinny old man was one of senior brother Ji's people. Although senior brother Ji was the mastermind, he knew that he would definitely die if he exposed senior brother Ji. "No one ordered me to do it. I did it alone." The man in white raised his head and looked at Zhuowen with determination. Zhuowen furrowed his brows and looked at the man in white in surprise. This guy's temper was quite stubborn. He still hadn't revealed senior brother Ji. Just as Zhuowen was about to use some tricks, a streamer flew over and landed in the sky above the peach forest. The streamer disappeared and revealed two figures. One of them was a beautiful woman and the other was a middle-aged man with a dignified expression. Zhuowen was no stranger to these two people. They were Lin Shiping and Han Yen, whom he had met in the starry sky fault. When the two of them parted ways with Zhuowen, they naturally returned to the Half-Moon Hall. This time, Yuan came to look for Han Yen. "Grand Elder." In the peach forest, the four elders and the other disciples all knelt on one knee. Their eyes were filled with respect. This was the Grand Elder, the second strongest expert in the Half-Moon Hall. His cultivation had reached the peak of the 8 steps void sky. Although he had only recently returned to the Half-Moon Hall, the sect master still passed the position of Grand Elder to Han Yen. Speaking of which, the previous Grand Elder was the current Enforcement Elder. He was the white-haired old man who had been sneak-attacked by the Blood Celestial Sword. At this moment, the Enforcement Elder's legs had finally recovered. He looked at Han Yen and said in a deep voice, "Grand Elder, this person has no respect for the law and is audacious. Not only did he humiliate the female disciples of the Half-Moon Hall, he also injured many disciples. I implore Grand Elder to arrest this person." The rest of the people in the peach forest followed the Enforcement Elder and shouted in unison. Naturally, they wanted Han Yen to arrest Zhuowen and interrogate him. Senior brother Ji, who had been grabbed by the neck by Zhuowen, heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. The Grand Elder was the second strongest expert in the Half-Moon Hall. He was considered a top expert in the entire star field. He knew that this kid in front of him was no match for the Grand Elder. This time, Juan would definitely be taught a lesson. Unfortunately, just as the enforcement elder finished speaking, he was slapped to the ground. His face was extremely red and a bright handprint appeared on it. It was extremely eye-catching. Everyone was stunned and looked at Han Yen, who had just arrived, in disbelief. They were extremely puzzled. Why did the Taishang elder suddenly attack the law enforcement elder? Everyone clearly didn't know what was going on. Senior brother Ji, who had been pleased with himself, was also stunned. He looked at Han Yen strangely and did not understand what Han Yen meant by doing this. Grand elderly, what are you doing? The enforcement elder was completely stunned and could not help but roar out in anger. Unfortunately, as soon as elder of law enforcement finished speaking, he was met with another slap on his face. The enforcement elder was once again slapped to the ground. His entire body trembled and his bones seemed to have fallen apart. Let me tell you why I slapped you. Han Yan's gaze was cold as he pointed at Juan and said, his name is Jun. He is the Juan who once destroyed the Dark Mirage sect, High Heaven sect, Heaven and Earth sect, Clear Void Peak, and Demon Pearl sect. He's also my savior. No matter what mistake he has made, it is not up to you to criticize him. As soon as Han Yen said this, the peach forest fell into a strange silence. Everyone looked at Zhuowen in disbelief. Chapter 2242. The result: the law enforcement elder was completely dumbfounded, especially when he heard Han Yan's words. His head exploded as he stood rooted to the ground. How could he not have heard of Zhuowen's name? This person was a big shot who had caused a stir in the entire star field during this period of time. Out of the 10 great sects, 5 of them had been destroyed by this person. This was definitely unprecedented and would not be replicated in the future. Although the Half Moon Hall was big and powerful, the law enforcement elder had never thought of going against Juan. But now, he had unknowingly offended this fiend who was feared by everyone in the star field. Senior brother Ji's face was deathly pale as his jaw dropped in shock. The person whom he had originally thought to be a nameless person was now revealed to be the terrifying and ruthless Jun. This was a person who dared to destroy a powerful force like the 10 great sects. Although senior brother Ji thought that his grandfather was the law enforcement elder and his status in the Half Moon Hall was not low, compared to Zhuowen, it was really insignificant. Han Yen no longer paid any attention to the law enforcement elder as he rushed in front of Zhuowen. His face had already changed into a smile as he said, Brother Zhua, I am really sorry that I did not come out to greet you in advance. It was really impolite of me to have frightened you. Zhuowen waved his hand and said indifferently, it's just a bunch of clowns. As he spoke, Zhuowen casually flung senior brother Ji to one side. His gaze landed on the trembling white-clothed man as he said with a voice filled with killing intent, you still have a chance to live. The man in white's forehead was drenched in cold sweat. He understood the meaning of Zhuowen's words very clearly. Zhuowen wanted him to reveal the person behind the scenes. Otherwise, based on Han Yan's attitude toward Zhuowen, he would not care even if he killed him. The white-robed man trembled as he looked at senior brother Ji, who was not far away. Then, he turned around and crawled in front of Zhuowen. This has nothing to do with me. It was senior brother Ji who told me to do this. It was also senior brother Ji who told me to frame you for insulting junior sister Yuan. Not far away, senior brother Ji's face was pale and bloodless. He sat on the ground dejectedly, as if he had lost his soul. The law enforcement elder's eyes widened. He didn't know that his grandson was the mastermind behind this matter. But the law enforcement elder suddenly arrived in front of senior brother Ji and slapped him. Senior brother Ji was slapped to the ground. His face was red and swollen. Pa. The law enforcement elder lifted senior brother Ji up with his right hand and slapped him without any trace of politeness. Senior brother Ji's face was swollen like a pig's head in an instant. Then, the law enforcement elder threw senior brother Ji to the ground. He knelt in front of Zhuowen and said guiltily, Brother Zhuowen, it's my fault for not disciplining my unfilial son well. He used such underhanded means to frame you. As he spoke, the law enforcement elder threw senior brother Ji in front of Zhuowen. Brother Zhuowen, I'll leave this unfilial son to you. You can kill him or torture him as you wish. Just pretend that I don't have this grandson. Zhuowen looked at the enforcement elder in surprise. He hadn't expected the enforcement elder to be so impartial. It was beyond his expectations. Brother Zhuo, junior brother Zhuo, the law enforcement elder Ji Wuyuan is famous for being old-fashioned and disciplined. That's why he can hold the position of law enforcement elder. Han Yen whispered. Zhuowen was startled, and then he nodded. He looked down at senior brother Ji, who was shivering and unconscious at his feet. He could see that the enforcement elder hadn't held back at all, and had directly injured senior brother Ji. Elder Ji, your grandson might have some misunderstanding with me. That's why he did such a stupid thing. You just have to teach him more in the future. He has suffered a lot. It's enough. He doesn't deserve to die. Wen waved his hand dispiritedly. This kind of thing was a little boring in his eyes. Moreover, he had just arrived at the half-moon hall. There was no need to be so forceful and kill as soon as he arrived. It wouldn't be beneficial for him to borrow the star chart of the 8 heavens. The law enforcement elder knelt on the ground and said gratefully to Zhuan, "Thank you for not killing me, brother Zhun." The law enforcement elder took out a jade token and handed it to Han Yen. Senior Han, this law enforcement token is not suitable for this old man. I'll take my leave. After he finished speaking, the enforcement elder thanked Zhuowen once again and left the peach forest with the delirious senior brother Ji. Han Yen sighed and said, "This old man's temper hasn't changed at all after so many years. He's really stubborn." The law enforcement token was the symbol of the law enforcement elder's status. Only with this token could one be considered a law enforcement elder. Now that Ji Wuji had given the token to Han Yen, it was obvious that he wanted to take the position of law enforcement elder. "Oh right, brother Zhuo, what do you plan to do with this person?" Han Yen suddenly looked at the white-clothed man and asked. Lin Shiping, who was standing beside Han Yen, looked at the white-clothed man with disgust. After hearing that the white-clothed man had insulted her junior sister, Lin Shiping didn't have any good impression of the white-clothed man. "Elder Han, do as you see fit," Zhuowen said indifferently. Han Yen nodded and immediately ordered, "This person insulted our junior sister. According to the sect rules, strip him of his status as a half-moon hall disciple, destroy his cultivation, and expel him from the sect." After Han Yen finished speaking, the 2 disciples behind him rushed out and grabbed the white-clothed man. A powerful divine power completely destroyed the white-clothed man's cultivation before he was taken away. After the disturbance was resolved, Han Yen smiled at Zhuowen and said, brother Zhuo, it hasn't been long since we met. May I know why you've come to the half-moon hall this time?" Zhuowen smiled and said, "Brother Han, can we talk in private?" Han Yen nodded and the 3 of them soon arrived at a stone hall at the end of the peach forest. After taking a seat, Zhuowen looked at Lin Shiping and said, "Shiping, why are you here with Elder Han?" Lin Shiping smiled and said, "I'm indebted to Elder Han for taking care of me. He allowed me to work by his side and occasionally gave me some pointers on cultivation." Zhuowen looked at Han Yen in surprise. The latter smiled and said, "I've been in the bone world for too long. At first, I couldn't get used to the outside world. Shiping, like me, has been in the bone world before, so I brought her to my side. It might be easier for me to get used to the outside world." Zhuowen nodded. Soon after, he solemnly said, "Brother Han, to be honest, I have come to Half-Moon Hall this time for the star chart of the 8 heavens." Han Yan's smile disappeared and he said seriously, "You want this? I'm afraid that's not possible. This belongs to the Yuezu. You can't take it away, and I won't let you take it away." Zhuowen smiled bitterly and said, "Brother Han, you've misunderstood. I'm just borrowing it. I've obtained an incomplete map before. That map is too unfamiliar to me and I don't know which heavens it belongs to. So I need to refer to the star chart of the 8 heavens." Chapter 2243. Map borrowing. Zhuowen frowned and asked in a deep voice, "How long does the moon ancestor usually stay in seclusion for?" Yuezu usually stays in seclusion for hundreds or thousands of years. Ever since the battle between Lord Brahma and the mysterious woman, Yuezu has only just started his seclusion, so Han Yen said helplessly. In other words, I have to wait for Yuezu to come out of seclusion? Yuan was speechless. Yuezu usually stayed in seclusion for hundreds or thousands of years. How long would he have to wait for Yuezu to come out of seclusion? Han Yan's expression changed slightly. That's not necessarily true. Although I'm the Supreme Elder, Yuezu was already in seclusion when I returned. I can't contact Yuezu, but the sect master can. I can help you contact the sect master. Just as Zhuo Wengang was about to agree, his communication jade talisman suddenly lit up. He looked at it and saw that it was a message from Tong Chimei. Her master wanted to meet him to discuss the star chart of the 8 heavens. Brother Han, come with me to the sect master's great hall. The sect master has already summoned me. Zhuan stood up and called out to Han Yen. Then, he turned into a streak of light and left the peach forest. Han Yen was surprised, but he still followed closely behind Zhuan with Lin Shiping. At the entrance of the sect master's great hall, a beautiful figure stood quietly. A gentle breeze blew past, lifting her hair. She was full of charm and charm. The beautiful figure looked in the direction of the peach forest. When she saw 2 streaks of light fly over, her beautiful eyes lit up with joy. The 2 streaks of light stopped in front of the beautiful figure, revealing 3 figures. These 3 people were naturally Zhuan, Han Yen, and Lin Shiping. The beautiful figure was, needless to say, Tong Chimei. When Tong Chimei saw Han Yen behind Zhuan, she exclaimed in surprise. However, she didn't forget her etiquette. She bowed and said, Chimei greets the Supreme Elder. Chimei, you're welcome. Let us in. Han Yen said with a smile. Tong Chimei nodded and didn't say anything. She led the 3 of them into the sect master's great hall. The sect great hall was extremely luxurious. It was many times more luxurious than the palaces of ordinary emperors. Pillars carved with crescent-shaped patterns stood tall, supporting the huge hall. A large hall, great hall. The great hall's sect master, Saturday. 5 cups of tea and 5 seats were placed on the stone table. 5 seats. Little friend Zhua, Elder Han, please sit. Elder Waning Moon said with a calm smile. Thoen, Han Yen, and the others sat down. Elder Waning Moon took a sip of tea and said softly, Zhua Xiaoyu, I heard from Elder Han that it was thanks to you that he was able to come out of the spatial fault. This time, our half-moon hall owes you a favor. Chimei also told me that you wanted to borrow the 8 heavens incomplete star map. Our half-moon hall has always repaid kindness with kindness and hatred with hatred. Since we owe you a favor and you need the 8 heavens incomplete star map, I will lend it to you on behalf of the half-moon hall. However, you can only use it for 3 days. Hearing this, Zhuowen naturally agreed. He cupped his fists and said seriously, if Sect Master Waning Moon is willing to lend us the 8 heavens incomplete star map, I will be extremely grateful. As for the time, 3 days is enough. Elder Waning Moon nodded and flicked her finger. 8 rays of blue light shot out from her spirit ring. Upon closer inspection, the 8 rays of blue light contained 8 jade slips. Needless to say, each jade slip represented a heaven's incomplete star map. Seeing Zhuowen put away the 8 jade slips, Elder Waning Moon reminded him, Zhua Xiaoyu, these 8 jade slips are not complete. They are more or less incomplete, so, Zhuan cupped his fists and said, thank you. I only need 3 days. After speaking, Yuan chatted with Elder Waning Moon and the others for a while before leaving. Tong Chimei naturally took Zhuowen back to her cave. After Zhuan and Tong Chimei left, Han Yen also left the sect master's hall. Elder Waning Moon was left sitting in front of the stone table. Elder Waning Moon, what do you think of this Zhuowen? Suddenly, a low voice slowly resounded in the spacious hall. Elder Waning Moon said, Ancestor, I feel like this Zhuowen isn't as strong as the rumors say. However, I admit that his talent is much stronger than Chimei's. It hasn't been long, but his cultivation is already at the 6th step of the Void Sky stage. The truth will never be seen through. If you can tell that this child is extraordinary with a single glance, then he will disappoint me. But clearly, that is not the case. Maybe you can't tell that this child is different, but I can. This child has the strength to fight against Lord Brahma. The low voice rang out again. Elder Waning Moon was shocked and said in disbelief, "Ancestor, are you joking? After all, Lord Brahma has grasped the heaven-breaking source and is more terrifying than ordinary void sky cultivators. How can this Juan be so powerful?" The low voice continued, "Perhaps you can't feel it, but I can feel that there is a power hidden in this child's body that makes me very wary. Although I don't know what kind of power it is, I feel that this power has an extremely powerful destructive power. It is even more threatening than Lord Brahma." The more Elder Waning Moon listened, the more shocked she became. Her beautiful face finally became serious. Although she did look at Zhuowen in a new light, that was only the attitude of a senior looking at a junior. However, after hearing this voice's evaluation, she no longer had this attitude. She knew that the power hidden in Zhuowen's body was very likely stronger than hers. At the same time, she thought of the 5 sects that Zhuowen had destroyed. Although those 5 sects couldn't compare to the Half Moon Hall, it would still take a lot of effort for the Half Moon Hall to destroy those 5 sections. However, Zhuowen had done it by himself. This definitely wasn't a fluke. Pay attention to this child. You must be on good terms with him. Also, I can see that Chimei has a very good impression of this child. If necessary, you can actually betroth Chimei to Zhuowen. The low voice sounded again. However, Elder Waning Moon frowned and said, "Ancestor, this isn't appropriate. After all, Chimei is the future successor of the Half Moon Hall. If she marries someone else, wouldn't we be handing the Half Moon Hall over to Zhuowen?" The low voice was silent for a moment before saying, "This matter can't be rushed. Chimei has the bloodline of our Half Moon Hall's ancestor. As long as Chimei can recover the dusty memories in her mind, she will be able to lead the Half Moon Hall to an even higher peak. Then it's better to be on good terms with Zhuowen first. The marriage alliance can be delayed. However, it's not a bad thing to let Chimei get closer to this Zhuowen. This Zhuowen has entered the Tower of Hanoi. Sooner or later he will face the great Brahma. When that time comes, if this Zhuowen really has the strength to fight against the great Brahma, why can't our Half Moon Hall help this Zhuowen attack the great Brahma?" Elder Waning Moon sighed and said, "Then will he be the next Purple Star Monarch?" Back then, the Purple Star Monarch was so outstanding, but in the end he still couldn't pass the top level of the Tower of Hanoi. Even if he did pass the top level, he would only be nibbled away by the great Brahma. Chapter 2244. Space-Time Quicksand River. Zhuowen sat cross-legged on a futon in an elegant attic room. 8 jade slips that emitted a faint blue light floated around him. The 8 jade slips represented the star maps of the 8 heavens. Among them, the star map of the Great Brahma Heavens domain was the most complete. The other 7 heavens maps were more or less incomplete. Zhuowen's glabella shone with a dazzling golden light. Countless rays of divine sense flowed into the 8 jade slips that floated around him. Zhuowen's divine sense was extremely powerful. He divided his divine sense into 8 parts and drilled them into the 8 jade slips. He was multitasking, reading the map in the jade slips. The heavens territory was too vast, so it would take Zhuowen a lot of time to browse through all of them. If an ordinary cultivator wanted to spend 3 days to browse through all 8 jade slips, it would be basically impossible to achieve. However, Zhuowen's divine sense was too powerful. 3 days was more than enough for him. On the morning of the 3rd day, Zhuowen slowly opened his eyes. His gaze fell on the jade slip behind him. He reached out with his right hand and pinched the jade slip in his palm. The other 7 jade slips all fell to the ground, their light dim. 6 desires heaven. Zhuowen looked at the jade slip silently and murmured in a low voice. 6 desires heaven was the heavens where Moyin Wushang was taken away by the mysterious woman. If he remembered correctly, the mysterious woman intended to take Moyin Wushang to 6 desires palace. Decades had passed since then. Speaking of which, Zhuowen missed Moyin Wushang very much. Zhuowen quickly made a copy of the jade slip, then put away the 8 jade slips and walked out of the attic. He had browsed through the star maps of the 8 heavens. Although there were many incomplete places, fortunately, the location of the space-time key was not in the incomplete area. In the end, Zhuowen locked onto the location of the key in the river of space-time quicksand in the 6 desires heavens. The river of space-time quicksand was a forbidden area in the Six Desires' heavenly domain. It was an extremely dangerous place, and its name struck terror in the hearts of the people in the Six Desires' heavenly domain. When he walked out of the attic, Tong Chime, who was guarding outside, walked towards him. "Chime, take this jade slip back. I've already finished reading it." Jun handed the 8 jade slips to Tong Chime. The latter's beautiful eyes were filled with surprise as she looked at Jun. There was a lot of information about the 8 heavens star charts. Even she wouldn't be able to finish reading them in 3 days, but Jun said that he had finished reading them. Of course, Tong Chime didn't think that Jun was bragging. It wasn't her first time meeting Zhuowen, and she knew Zhuowen's character. Since Zhuowen said that he had finished reading it, he must have finished reading it. He would never say anything about such a trivial matter. Putting away the jade slip, Tong Chime asked, "Big brother Zhua, have you found the place you're looking for?" Zhuowen smiled and said, "Found it, thanks to the star chart of the 8 heavens." "Where is it?" Tong Chime asked curiously. "The river of space-time quicksand in the 6 Desires heavens." Zhuowen said. Tong Chime wasn't an outsider. She had a good relationship with Zhuowen, so he didn't hide the river of space-time quicksand. Moreover, even if Tong Chime knew about the river of space-time quicksand, without the map on Zhuowen, she couldn't know the correct way to enter the river of space-time quicksand. After entering, she would be like a blind man searching for an elephant. Only with the real map could she find the space-time divine key hidden in the river of space-time quicksand. "It's the river of space-time quicksand? Big brother Zhua, do you know how dangerous the river of space-time quicksand is? This place can definitely be called the most dangerous place in the 6 Desires heavens. Its reputation is comparable to the Great Brahma Domain's Starry Sky Fault and Waning Moons. Do you plan to go there?" Tong Chime's pretty face changed slightly. Obviously, she had heard of the river of space-time quicksand. Jun smiled and said, "Chi, don't worry. It's not like you don't know my character. I won't do something I'm not confident in." Tong Chime frowned slightly and could only sigh. She knew Zhuowen's character, so she didn't try to persuade him. She only reminded Zhuowen to be more careful. "That's right, Chime. Do you know where else there are calamity crystals other than the training grounds in the Middle Universe?" Zhuowen suddenly asked. Zhuowen's clone, Devour, had already cultivated to the level of Thunder Fire Real God. However, he had used up all the calamity crystals. As a result, he hadn't even survived a single wind disaster. If he had a large number of calamity crystals now, he would have definitely survived a few wind disasters and wouldn't still be a Thunder Fire Real God. Tong Chime muttered to herself for a moment and said, "The calamity crystals are rare ores. If Big Brother Zhua needs them, our half-moon hall has some. I can give them to you." "How many does your half-moon hall have?" Zhuowen asked. Tong Chime said, "About several tens of thousands. I'm not too sure about the specifics. These calamity crystals were obtained by the other disciples in the Middle Universe training grounds." Zhuowen revealed a disappointed expression. Several tens of thousands of calamity crystals were like a cup of water on a burning cart of firewood to him. It should be known that when he had passed through the lightning disasters and fire disasters, he had used up several tens of thousands of calamity crystals, or even millions of calamity crystals. The amount of calamity crystals he had obtained in the training grounds was definitely the most. Unfortunately, Devour was like a bottomless pit. The speed at which he used up the calamity crystals was too fast. After becoming a Thunder Fire Real God, Yun could imagine that Devour's consumption of calamity crystals would be even more ferocious than before. As for waiting for the wind disasters to arrive, it would take too long. Zhuowen really couldn't afford to wait. Tong Chime could also see the disappointment on Zhuowen's face. She knew that Zhuowen didn't care about the several tens of thousands of calamity crystals. "Big brother Zhua, do you need a lot of calamity crystals?" Tong Chime asked. Zhuowen nodded and said, "To be honest, my doppelganger is walking the path of 3 extreme realms. I think you've heard of this realm, so my need for calamity crystals is indeed huge." Tong Chime wasn't surprised. She had known that Zhuowen's doppelganger was walking the path of 3 extreme realms for a long time. Tong Chime pondered for a moment and then said in a deep voice, Big Brother Zhua, in the entire Great Brahma domain, other than the training ground in the middle of the universe, only the extreme west has reserves of calamity crystals. It is said that there are mines of calamity crystals in the Inqing Yuan, Quebec. Inqing Yuan K. Zhuowen's eyes lit up. Inqing Yuan K was huge. Although Zhuowen and the others had entered the deepest part of Inqing Yuan K, the Luo God Palace ruins, that was only the core of Inqing Yuan, Quebec. He was sure that there were no calamity crystals in the Luo God Palace ruins, and Tong Chimei wouldn't lie to him. In other words, the calamity crystals should be outside the core of Inqing Yuan, Quebec. Chapter 2245. Ryuka's strange situation. Many thanks, Chimei. I might have to return to the far west this time. Please send my regards to the sect master, Yuezu, and Elder Han Yen. This is the heavenly domain starry sky essence. Please take good care of it. One cupped his fists, took out a bottle of heavenly domain starry sky essence, and handed it to Tong Chimei before leaving. Tong Chimei silently watched Zhuowen's back as he left. She let out a soft sigh, but did not try to persuade him to stay. After leaving the half-moon hall, Zhuowen took out his flying ship and left the star field in a streak of light. In the far west, the myriad magnet sea was shrouded in a powerful magnetic field. Ever since the four great islands failed crusade against Duphi City, the myriad magnet sea became the sole ruler of Ryuka. Ryuka's fame was unparalleled, and they became the strongest force in the myriad magnet sea and even the far west. Moreover, because Yun obtained all the resources of the Luotian Palace, Ryuka's development in Duphi City was extremely fast. In the far west, all the cultivators who had heard of the Long family were filled with awe. However, most of them were eager to become a disciple of the Long family. In the far west, who did not know that Ryuka was rich and had a deep foundation. Most of the cultivators who joined Ryuka had their cultivations greatly increased. They were very clear that this was because Ryuka was rich in resources, and the energy in the Ryuka's territory was much denser than the other places in the far west. At this moment, in the Ryuka Tower in Duphi City, Zhua Xiaotian, Feng Xiao, Lu Hantian, Dou Xian, and the other Ryuka higher-ups were sitting in the hall, their brows tightly knitted, not saying a word. The entire hall was eerily silent. Finally, Lu Hantian spoke. He stood up and said in a deep voice, "Everyone, what should we do now? Chen Shui has disappeared without a trace. Even if we send out many people, we have no news at all? If Zhuan comes back, how are we going to explain it to him?" Zhua Xiaotian, who was standing at the head of the table, looked at Feng Xiao beside him. The latter also saw the look in Zhua Xiaoyan's eyes, but she just lowered her head and didn't speak. Zhua Xiaoyan gave a soft sigh and said, "Keep searching. I think Chen Shui might have gone out to do something and will be back after a while." Dou Xian suddenly spoke up. He cupped his hands at Zhua Xiaoyan and said, "City Lord, Madame Chen Shui was with your wife back then. What happened to Madame Chen Shui? Your wife should know best, right?" Feng Xiao's beautiful eyes condensed, and she immediately said unhappily, "Senior Dou Xian, although you are the strongest in Duphi City now and the most respected, my affairs shouldn't be your turn to care, right?" Dou Xian lowered his head and said in a deep voice, "Dou Xian doesn't dare. I'm just voicing my thoughts. If Madame doesn't like it, Dou Xian will apologize to Madame." Feng Xiao silently looked at Dou Xian. Although she was unhappy in her heart, she didn't dare act up. Dou Xian's cultivation was indeed the strongest in Duphi City. Over the past 10 years, with the help of the Luotian Palace's resources, Dou Xian had already reached the peak of the Void Sky 7th step, far surpassing all the Ryuka people in Duphi City. Moreover, Dou Xian controlled 70% of Duphi City's forces. Although Feng Xiao was unhappy with Dou Xian's words, she didn't dare fall out with Dou Xian. Don't argue, I'll take care of this matter. As for Chen Shui's matter, Dou Xian hopes that you can send several tens of thousands of troops to help my people look for her." Zhua Xiaotian waved his hand, trying to smooth things over. He then looked at Dou Xian. Dou Xian raised his head and revealed a mocking smile as he said, "City Lord, I'm very sorry. Our Duphi City is currently being eyed by many forces. For the safety of Duphi City, You can forget about sending several tens of thousands of troops. When these words came out, Zhuo Xiaoyan's eyes immediately became sharp. However, Dou Xian didn't back down at all, as if he didn't put Zhuo Xiaotian in his eyes at all. Dou Xian, have you forgotten Zhuowen's instructions? You're not the city lord of Dubhe City right now, and Uncle Zhuo is the city lord. Do you plan on disobeying the city lord's orders now? Lu Hantian's temper was rather irritable. He immediately stood up and spoke in a cold voice. Dou Xian coldly looked at Lu Hantian and said, I haven't forgotten, so I'm calling Zhuo Xiaotian the city lord. As for orders, only I can manage my troops. Don't even think about interfering. After saying this, Dou Xian stood up and left the hall. The rest of the people in the hall all revealed looks of anger. Uncle Zhuo, this Dou Xian is too much. He actually doesn't put you in his eyes at all just because his cultivation is high. Lu Hantian said with a frown. Zhuo Xiaotian sighed softly and said, in the past, the reason why Dou Xian was so respectful to me was all because of Zhun. However, ever since the news of Zhuan falling into a fault in the starry sky, Dou Xian doesn't put us in his eyes anymore. There's no one in Ryuka who can suppress this Dou Xian. Hantian, you have a rather impulsive temper, but don't act recklessly. You're not a match for this Dou Xian. Furthermore, this Dou Xian controls most of the troops in Dubhe City. It's best not to offend him. Lu Hantian frowned and said, Uncle, if this Dou Xian goes overboard and forcefully seizes the position, what will we do? This Dou Xian is simply a despicable person. It's very likely that he will do such a thing. If he wants to seize the position, then I'll give it to him. As long as he can protect the Ryuka people, it's fine. Zhuo Xiaotian shook his head helplessly and said. Lu Hantian fell into silence, but he did not refute it. However, there was a flame burning in his eyes. All right, let's end this matter here. You can all leave. Zhuo Xiaotian tiredly waved his hand and the high-level members in the hall all left. Lu Hantian also cupped his hands and left. When there was no one left in the hall, Zhuo Xiaotian suddenly looked at Feng Xiao beside him and said in a soft voice, Xiao, what happened? Ever since Chen Shui disappeared, you've been acting strange. Feng Xiao turned around and Zhuo Xiaotian could clearly see the fear in Feng Xiao's beautiful eyes. His heart was filled with even more doubts. Xiaotian, Chen Shui almost killed me in the past. She was very terrifying and powerful at that time and I couldn't resist her at all. But in the end, I don't know why, but Chen Shui didn't make a move and just left like a crazy person. Feng Xiao said in a daze. Zhuo Xiaotian's pupils shrank as he said, that's impossible. How could Chen Shui do something like this? She has always been very gentle. Feng Xiao suddenly said in a low voice. Chen Shui said before that she was not like herself. She said that there was a strong, strange power in her body that seemed to be controlling her, making her do a series of strange things. Zhuo Xiaotian fell into silence. He sat in his seat with tightly knit brows. Suddenly, the sound of hurried footsteps could be heard from outside. Shortly after, the winged Wu Dai hurriedly walked in. Her pretty face was filled with a panicked expression. Wu Dai, what happened? Zhuo Xiaotian looked at Wu Dai and asked. Wu Dai quickly said, Uncle Zhuo, quickly come out and help Han Tian. He and Dou Xian are fighting and if you don't stop them, Han Tian will be beaten to death. What? Chapter 2246. Turning the tables under Wu Dai's lead, Zhuo Xiaotian and Feng Xiao walked out of the hall. Outside the hall, there was a huge square. At this moment, the square was surrounded by a dense mass of soldiers. Their shouts spread out like thunder, and it sounded like they were making a huge commotion. In the center of the square, two figures were exchanging blows at an extremely fast speed. If one looked carefully, one would see that one of the figures was in an extremely sorry state. He was at an absolute disadvantage and was knocked to the ground time and time again. When Zhuo Xiaotian and Feng Xiao were brought to the square by Wu Dai, the cheering soldiers became much softer and consciously opened up a path for them. The surrounding soldiers silently looked at Zhuo Xiaotian, the city lord, but no one shouted the name of the city lord, nor did anyone salute the city lord. Zhuo Xiaotian frowned slightly, But he didn't care about this detail. He was worried about Lu Hantian. Lu Hantian's talent was very strong. Over the years, he relied on the resources of Luotian Palace to raise his cultivation to the 5th step of the Void Sky Realm. However, compared to Dou Xian, who was at the 7th step of the Void Sky Realm, the gap was too big. Therefore, Lu Hantian and Dou Xian fighting now wasn't a wise choice. Bang! A dull sound of something breaking through the air resounded. Immediately after, a sorry figure flew out and crashed in front of Zhuo Xiaotian and the other two. Zhuo Xiaotian shouted and took a step forward. His palms were like the wind as they slammed into the air in front of him. The frightening palm force was just like a furious dragon as it whizzed out. Immediately, it caught the flying figure in his hand. Zhuo Xiaotian's eyesight was amazing. Naturally, he could tell at a glance that the flying figure was Lu Hantian. Boom! When Zhuo Xiaotian's palms came into contact with Lu Hantian's back, an earth-shattering and terrifying force was transmitted to his hands. Puchi! Spitting out a mouthful of blood, Zhuo Xiaotian retreated in a sorry state. He only managed to stop himself when he was more than 100 meters away. Zhuo Xiaotian's eyes flashed with a cold light. This force was extremely terrifying. He also realized that this force didn't come from Lu Hantian himself, but Dou Xian deliberately did it. Xiaon, are you all right? Feng Xiao quickly came to Zhuo Xiaotian's side and said worriedly. Zhuo Xiaotian shook his head, then gently put down Lu Hantian and said, Hantian's injuries are very serious. Xiao, do you still have any healing pills on you? At this moment, Lu Hantian was in a very miserable state. The clothes in front of Lu Hantian's chest were all dyed red with blood. As for Lu Hantian, his chest was heaving up and down. His eyes were tightly shut and he was completely unconscious. Zhuo Xiaotian could clearly feel that Lu Hantian's aura was gradually weakening. If he didn't have the support of a powerful healing pill, then Lu Hantian would undoubtedly die. Feng Xiao shook her head and said, Xiaotian, I've used up all the divine pills on me, so I can only go to the treasury to get some. Zhuo Xiaotian said, go get it quickly. If you don't use the healing pill, Hantian's injuries will get worse and worse. Feng Xiao also knew that the situation was urgent. She stood up and rushed towards the center of Dupi City, while Wu Dai half knelt beside Lu Hantian, her expression full of panic. Bang! Feng Xiao didn't rush out for long before she was blocked by a divine barrier and involuntarily retreated dozens of steps. Dou Xian, what are you doing? Feng Xiao turned her head and looked at Dou Xian behind her with shock and anger in her beautiful eyes. This divine barrier was released by Dou Xian. Dou Xian slowly walked over from the square. The surrounding soldiers all showed a look of reverence and made a path for Dou Xian. They bowed down with a respectful and humble expression. Madam, this is a battle between me and Lu Hantian. It's best if you don't interfere. And the city lord, you too. Dou Xian said slowly. Zhuo Xiaotian's face suddenly became gloomy. He coldly stared at Dou Xian and said, Do you not have me in your eyes? Do you still want to kill in front of me? The corners of Dou Xian's mouth curled into a mocking smile. He laughed and said, Kill? Yes, today I will kill in front of the city lord I respect. Do you think you can stop me? What right do you have to stop me? Do you have the strength? Zhuo Xiaotian trembled with anger. He growled, Dou Xian, don't forget that the reason you were able to advance to the Void Sky 7 steps is because of my son Jun. Back then, you also made an oath to be loyal to my son. Yes, I did say that I was loyal to Zhuowen, but unfortunately, Zhuowen fell into a fault in the starry sky. Even if he didn't die after falling into that place, he would never be able to come out. In other words, my oath back then can be nullified. Dou Xian said indifferently. You. Zhuo Xiaotian's eyes were crimson red as he spoke coldly. Dou Xian said impatiently, I don't want to play riddles with you now. I once swore to be loyal to Jun, but I didn't say that I would be loyal to you. Since Jun is no longer here, then it's naturally impossible for me to submit to a group of ants with insufficient strength like you. Now, announce that you're giving the position of city lord to me, and I won't kill all of you out of consideration for Jun. Otherwise, don't blame me for being merciless. Zhuo Xiaotian clenched his fists tightly. His gaze passed by Dou Xian and descended onto the group of soldiers behind him. Unfortunately, all of them lowered their heads when they met Zhuo Xiaoyan's gaze, and they didn't dare to make eye contact with him at all. Dou Xian sneered, "Don't waste your time. These soldiers will be mine in the future." In the far west, only the strong can rule over the others. All of you aren't qualified. As soon as he said this, the soldiers behind him knelt on the ground one after another and bowed their heads to Dou Xian. Zhuo Xiaoyan's face was deathly pale, and he fell silent. He knew that it was useless for him to say anything now. No matter where he was, he would always rely on his fist to speak. A promise and an agreement would never be reliable. Zhuo Xiaoyan silently glanced at the seriously injured Lu Hantian and the helpless Wu Dai at his feet, as well as Feng Xiao, who was not far away with a look of grief and indignation, and he said dejectedly, "Remember your promise. I'll give you the position of city lord." As he spoke, Zhuo Xiaoyan took off the city lord's token from his waist and threw it to Dou Xian. Dou Xian caught the token with a satisfied look in his eyes. With a wave of his right hand, the key to the treasury that was originally in Feng Xiao's hand was forcibly snatched by Dou Xian. Immediately, Dou Xian flicked his finger and took out a divine pill and threw it to Zhuo Xiaoyan. "Take this healing divine pill. It's more than enough to save that trash's life." Zhuo Xiaotian caught the divine pill and said angrily, "This is only a level 3 divine pill. It doesn't have much effect on cold weather. Dou Xian, you're going too far." As soon as Zhuo Xiaotian finished speaking, a powerful divine power swept over. Zhuo Xiaotian let out a muffled groan and was sent flying. He smashed into the ground dozens of meters away, blood spurting from the corner of his mouth. Dou Xian withdrew his hand, and the divine pill in Zhuo Xiaoyan's hand automatically floated and fell into Dou Xian's hand. Immediately, Dou Xian said indifferently, "If you're not satisfied, I'll take back this divine pill. If you still dare to talk nonsense, I'll be merciless." Chapter 2247. Abdicate the throne. When Zhuo Xiaotian still wanted to get up, Feng Xiao stretched out her jade hand and held Zhuo Xiaotian down. "Shant, calm down. If you continue to be so impulsive, then Dou Xian will really kill you." Feng Xiao quickly said. Zhuo Xiaotian forced himself to calm down and looked at Lu Hantian, who was lying unconscious on the ground not far away, with a trace of guilt in his eyes. If he hadn't been so impulsive just now, perhaps that divine pill wouldn't have been snatched away by Dou Xian. Although the level 3 god pill did not have much of an effect on Lu Hantian's recovery, it could at least stop the deterioration of Lu Hantian's injuries. But now, because of his impulsiveness, the divine pill had been taken away by Dou Xian. Zhuo Xiaotian was indeed regretting it. "Uncle Zhuo, you don't have to feel guilty. I still have a level 4 healing divine pill. Although it can't heal Han Tian's injuries, it can at least prevent Han Tian's injuries from worsening." Wu Dai took out a pill covered with green patterns from her spirit ring and fed it to Lu Hantian. After swallowing this pill, Lu Hantian's aura stabilized a lot, and his breathing was not as hurried as before. However, the injuries on his body were too serious, and if he wanted to recover, he would need a higher-grade healing pill. When Zhuo Xiaotian saw that Lu Hantian's aura had stabilized, he could not help but let out a sigh of relief. "Xiaotian, the most important thing now is to think of a way to evacuate the Ryuka clansmen from the Celestial Pivot City. Although Dou Xian seems to be letting us go on the surface, I'm afraid that he will secretly kill us. His character is extremely ruthless." Feng Xiao said in a low voice. Zhuo Xiaotian nodded and immediately lifted Lu Hantian and hurriedly left the square with Feng Xiao and Wu Dai. After entering the hall, Zhuo Xiaotian took out his communication jade token and began to gather the Ryuka tribesmen. Unfortunately, Zhuo Xiaotian waited in the hall for 4 hours, but no one came. His heart sank. He knew that something must have happened to the Ryuka, and they must have been held back by Dou Xian. "Shant, this is bad. There's a trap array outside. We can't get out." Feng Xiao stood by the window. Her pretty face changed greatly as she said to Zhuo Xiaotian. Zhuo Xiaotian suddenly slammed his palm on the table and said with a gloomy expression, "What a good Dou Xian. He really didn't plan to let us go. Just now, it was just a stalling tactic. His goal was to make me give up the Dubhe City Lord's waste token. Then what should we do? Feng Xiao was also a little flustered. Zhuo Xiaotian frowned, but he could only sit in his seat dejectedly. He really couldn't find a good way to leave this place. Dou Xian had already planned everything that he could think of. Over the past decade, especially after the news of Zhuowen falling into the starry sky fault had spread to the far west, Dou Xian had begun to stir. With Dou Xian's prestige and strength, he quickly took control of most of the military forces in Dubhe City. In this kind of place, strength and military force were everything. The city lord was just a title. If Dou Xian wanted to usurp the throne, he only needed to say a word and he would successfully become the new city lord. However, Dou Xian didn't do that. He wanted Zhuo Xiaotian to take the initiative to abdicate and give up the city lord. Zhuo Xiaotian, in 3 days, I will hold the city lord conferring ceremony in the square. You must be there. Otherwise, I can't guarantee the safety of your Ryuka people. Suddenly, Dou Xian's voice echoed in the hall. Zhuo Xiaotian raised his head, his eyes turning red, but he didn't lose his mind. If you dare to touch a hair of my people, Wuxian will make you regret it. Zhuo Xiaotian said coldly. Dou Xian's voice sounded again. Don't worry, if you cooperate in 3 days, I, Dou Xian, will let your people leave Dubhe City safely. If you violate this oath, the heavenly Tao will devour you. Zhuo Xiaotian's eyes flashed. This Dou Xian was swearing on the heavenly Tao. It seemed that he really intended to let the Ryuka people go. If you really let the Ryuka people leave safely, I will participate in the city lord conferring ceremony in 3 days, Zhuo Xiaotian said coldly. City lord is indeed straightforward. This will be the last time I call you city lord. In 3 days, the new city lord of Dubhe City will be born. Dou Xian's voice was like thunder. It came and went quickly. 3 days later, in Dubhe City's largest square, Dubhe Square, people came and went. It was very lively. In the center of the square stood a white jade platform. Dou Xian sat on the throne in the center of the platform. On his left and right stood 2 black-armored cultivators with vast auras. The square was surrounded by a dark mass. In addition to the soldiers, there were also the star lords of the planets in the Ziwei galaxy around Dubhe City. The so-called star lords were the lords of the planets. They ruled over the living beings of one of the planets in the Ziwei galaxy. Most of them were in the virtual sky world, but of course, they were generally in the early stage of the virtual sky world. At this moment, the star lords around the square were looking at Dou Xian on the platform with awe. Although many people knew that a new city lord might be born today, no one came out to speak for justice. They knew that even if Zhuo Xiaotian was the rightful city lord of Dubhe City, he was not strong enough. As for Zhuowen, who was revered by everyone in Dubhe City, many cultivators in Dubhe City no longer feared the Long family because of the news that Zhuowen had fallen into a fault in the starry sky. It could be said that the cultivators of Dubhe City were not in awe of the Ryuka, but Tun. Since something happened to Zhuowen and the Ryuka did not have an extremely strong cultivator, they naturally did not have the support of the cultivators of Dubhe City. At this moment, the dark mass of people on the east side of the square consciously parted to form a path. At the end of the path, 3 people slowly walked over. They were Zhuo Xiaotian, Feng Xiao, and Wu Dai. Lu Hantian was seriously injured, so Zhuo Xiaotian had arranged for him to stay in the hall. As for the trap formation outside the hall, it was removed by Dou Xian on the 3rd day. Dou Xian looked at Zhuo Xiaotian and the other 2 slowly walking over with a smile on his face. You're finally here, my dear city lord. Zhuo Xiaotian was expressionless as he slowly walked to the bottom of the white jade platform. After telling Feng Xiao and Wu Dai to wait below, he stepped onto the white jade platform. Zhuo Xiaoyan came in front of Dou Xian and said coldly, Dou Xian, remember the oath you made in front of me 3 days ago. Dou Xian raised his eyebrows and said, Don't worry, I swore to the heavenly Tao. Do you think I dare to go back on my words? Zhuo Xiaotian nodded and then ignored Dou Xian. He turned his head and came to the edge of the platform. Facing the dark mass of people on the square below, he said loudly, Today I, Zhuo Xiaoyan, announce that I resign from the position of city lord. I intend to hand over the new city lord to Dou Xian. He is more qualified than me. Just as the city lord conferring ceremony was in full swing, a stream of light swept over from the edge of the myriad magnet sea. It was a flying ship. Chapter 2248. Fury on Dubhe Square. The moment Zhuo Xiaotian abdicated and gave the city lord position to Dou Xian, the crowd around the square burst into earth-shattering cheers. Welcome, new city lord. Around the square, rows of soldiers in black armor knelt on one knee and bowed to Dou Xian, who was sitting on the throne on the high platform, to show their allegiance. Dou Xian looked at all of this silently with a smug smile on his face. Zhuo Xiaotian, who was standing at the edge of the high platform, lowered his head slightly, his eyes full of helplessness. From the reaction of the crowd in the square, it could be seen that Dou Xian had completely controlled the soldiers of Dubhe City for more than 10 years, and Zhuo Xiaotian knew nothing about it. Now that he saw the cheers of the soldiers below the high platform, his heart was full of helplessness and he sighed. He knew that he was a failure as the city lord of Dubhe City. Dou Xian stood up and pressed his hands in the air. The cheering crowd around the high platform suddenly fell silent. All eyes were on Dou Xian. They were all waiting for him to continue. Dou Xian was very satisfied with the crowd's reaction. He clenched his right hand, and a terrifying divine power turned into a huge hand that grabbed at Zhuo Xiaotian. Zhuo Xiaotian did not expect Dou Xian to make a move, so he was not prepared. At this moment, Zhuo Xiaotian's face changed drastically. His reaction was fast enough, but he only took out a divine weapon to block in front of him. Puchi! The divine power hand slammed into his defensive divine weapon, and Zhuo Xiaotian flew out like a kite with a broken string. Blood spurted out from his mouth like a fountain, and he looked extremely miserable. Bang! Zhuo Xiaotian fell below the high platform, and the defensive divine weapon in front of him dimmed. He spat out another mouthful of blood. Xiaoan, are you okay? Feng Xiao immediately rushed over and helped Zhuo Xiaotian up, her beautiful eyes full of worry and anger. Zhuo Xiaotian had already given up the city lord position, so why did Dou Xian still make a move and a sneak attack? He was too despicable. Dou Xian, you despicable and shameless bastard. You clearly promised the mayor that as long as he gave up his position, you would let the Ryuka safely leave Dubhe City. Wu Dai said angrily. Dou Xian slowly walked to the edge of the high platform and looked down at Zhuo Xiaotian and the other two. He said casually, yes. I did say that, and I even swore to the heavens that I would let the Ryuka off. However, I never said that I would let the old Castellan go. After I kill the old Castellan, I will naturally let all the Ryuka off. Dou Xian's gaze swept over the crowd on the square as he continued, whoever kills the old Castellan, Dou Xian will reward them handsomely, at least one grade 7 divine pellet. As soon as Dou Xian said this, the eyes of everyone in the square turned red. A level 7 divine pill was an extremely rare treasure. They might not even be able to obtain it in their dreams. Now that Dou Xian had directly promised them a level 7 divine pill as long as they killed the old city lord, who wouldn't do it? Kill. As long as we kill this Zhuo Xiaotian, we'll be able to obtain a level 7 divine pill. Go. That's right. Kill this Zhuo Xiaotian. What qualifications does a trash have to become the Castellan? He'd better die as soon as possible. All of a sudden, the eyes of the cultivators around the square turned red. One after another, attacks erupted from their hands. They were like dazzling fireworks that suddenly exploded out of thin air. It looked gorgeous and colorful. Zhuo Xiaoyan roared angrily and poured all his divine power into his defensive divine artifact. A golden semicircle appeared around the three of them. At the same time, Wu Dai and Feng Xiao also took out their own defensive divine artifacts to protect themselves from the attacks coming from all directions. Peng ping peng. The dense sounds of collisions were incessant, and the dazzling explosions were multicolored, like bright and glistening flowers. There were simply too many people around the square. With so many attacks coming at them, even Zhuo Xiaotian and the other two couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. It was extremely difficult for them to resist. Dou Xian sat back on the throne and looked down coldly at Zhuo Xiaoyan and the other two who were bitterly holding on under the attacks of the crowd. Back then, he had made a heavenly Dao oath to Zhuo Xiaotian, but he had made a small move in the oath. He had only let the other Ryuka people go, but not Zhuo Xiaotian. Moreover, even if he fulfilled the oath and let the other Ryuka people go, he would secretly send people to completely eradicate the Ryuka people to prevent future trouble. Dou Xian knew very well that Zhuo Xiaotian and the other two wouldn't be able to hold on for long. In a while, Zhuo Xiaotian and the other two would be completely blown to smithereens by the attacks of the crowd. At this moment, hundreds of billions of kilometers away from Dupi City, surrounded by the Z-Way galaxy, a stream of light was flying over like a bolt of lightning. Its speed had reached an incredible level. After a while, the stream of light from hundreds of billions of kilometers away entered the range of the Z-Way galaxy and finally stopped in the starry sky outside Dupi City. The light faded away, revealing a flying ship that was as black as ink. The airship was not large. The hatch of the airship opened and a young man in snow-white clothes slowly stepped out. "I've finally returned to Dupi City. I wonder how father and mother are doing? And what is Chen Shui doing now?" The corners of Zhuowen's mouth curled into a smile. Immediately, his powerful divine sense subconsciously swept towards Dupi City. Zhuowen's divine sense was now extremely powerful. A mere Dupi City was too small for his divine sense. He instantly swept through the entire Dupi City. However, the smile on the corners of Zhuowen's mouth quickly became extremely stiff, and his gaze became murderous. "Dou Xian, you're simply courting death." Zhuowen's eyes surged with murderous intent. He took a step forward and rushed towards the interior of Dupi City. At this moment, the defensive divine artifact released by Zhuo Xiaotian was getting dimmer and dimmer, but the surrounding attacks were getting stronger and stronger, as if there was no end to them. Bang! Finally, countless cracks appeared on the surface of the light shield and it finally collapsed with a loud bang. Zhuo Xiaotian and the other two spat out a mouthful of blood at the same time. Their faces were pale and bloodless, and they were extremely weak. "It seems that we're finished." Zhuo Xiaotian raised his head with difficulty and looked at the attacks whistling towards him. His eyes were filled with despair. Without the defense of the divine artifact, it was impossible for the three of them to resist such a terrifying attack. These attacks were enough to tear the three of them to pieces. There might not even be ashes left. The moment these attacks were about to hit Zhuo Xiaotian and the other two, a figure in fluttering white clothes suddenly rushed over and landed in front of them. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.